Hello, dear friends. So glad you could join us at the Fanfic Club. Today's narrative adventure is titled, What If Percy Jackson Was Sent to Rescue a Demigod in Britain and Discovered Harry Potter Was Actually the Son of Hecate? We put our heart into every story we share. If you appreciate our work, showing some love with a like and subscribe would make our day. The story begins now. Chapter 1. The mission across the pond. The Atlantic Ocean stretched beneath Percy Jackson like a massive blue blanket, its familiar presence both comforting and unsettling. As much as he loved water, sitting in the cramped economy class of a transatlantic flight wasn't exactly his idea of quality time with his father's domain. Each patch of turbulence sent a fresh wave of anxiety through him. Being thousands of feet in the air was bad enough. Zeus had made his feelings about Poseidon's offspring in his territory painfully clear on multiple occasions, but the son of the sea god had more pressing concerns than divine family drama. "This is your captain speaking," a crackling voice announced overhead. "We're beginning our descent into London Heathrow. Local time is 7:22 a.m., and the weather is, surprise, surprise, overcast with light rain." Percy shifted in his seat, glancing at the window where grey clouds obscured the approaching British coastline. His ADHD made the 7-hour flight feel like an eternity, and not even the in-flight movies had helped. He pulled out the small notebook Annabeth had given him before he left, flipping through the hasty notes he'd scrawled during his briefing with Chiron. Powerful demigod signature. London area. Magical interference. Extraction priority. The mission had come suddenly 3 days ago. Percy had been enjoying a rare peaceful afternoon at Camp Half-Blood, sparring with Clarice when Chiron had summoned him to the big house with unusual urgency. The centaur's expression had been grave as he explained the situation. "We've detected an extremely powerful demigod signature in Britain," Chiron had said, his tail flicking nervously as he paced the worn floorboards of his office. "Grover sensed it first while traveling in Europe. Something unusual." Percy had raised an eyebrow. "Unusual how?" "The signature is both masked and amplified by another form of magic, something ancient but different from our own. It's unlike anything I've encountered in my centuries of training heroes." Chiron's weathered face had creased with concern. "And where there is power, monsters will inevitably follow. So you want me to go find this demigod and bring them to camp?" Percy had asked, already calculating how long he'd be away from Annabeth. They'd been planning a weekend at Montauk. Chiron had nodded solemnly. "Normally I would send a satyr, but whatever is interfering with our detection might require your particular talents. This demigod's aura suggests they might be a child of one of the more powerful gods. Like mine," Percy had concluded. "Indeed. There's also the matter of age. Most demigods are brought to camp young, but our reading suggests this one might be older, possibly your age or slightly younger. That's weird. How have they survived this long without training?" "That," Chiron had said grimly, "is precisely what concerns me." The plane jolted, yanking Percy back to the present as the landing gear deployed with a heavy mechanical groan. He gripped the armrests, silently praying to both his father and reluctantly to Zeus that they'd make it safely to the ground. The prayer to Zeus came with a mental footnote: "Please don't blast me out of the sky, uncle. I'm just doing my job." Next to him, an elderly British woman smiled sympathetically. "First time flying, dear." "Something like that," Percy muttered, trying to look more relaxed than he felt. "Don't worry," she patted his arm with a papery hand. "We Brits may not do everything right, but landings at Heathrow are usually spot on." Percy managed a strained smile. Being inside a metal tube thousands of feet above the earth wasn't the natural habitat for a son of Poseidon. He'd much rather be sailing. Or swimming. Or doing literally anything that didn't involve being in Zeus's territory. His hand instinctively reached for his pocket, where Riptide, disguised as a ballpoint pen, rested. Just touching it provided some comfort. Whatever awaited him in London, at least he wouldn't face it unarmed. The plane touched down with a screech of rubber against tarmac, and Percy released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. A flight attendant's cheerful voice welcomed them to London, rattling off weather information and gate numbers that Percy barely registered. As passengers began the customary scramble for overhead bins, Percy remained seated, reviewing Chiron's final instructions. Find the demigod. Explain their heritage. Offer safe passage to camp. Simple in theory, but something told him this mission would be anything but straightforward. The London Underground was a chaotic maze of tunnels and color-coded lines that made the New York subway system seem straightforward by comparison. Percy stood before a large map in Heathrow Terminal 5, trying to decipher the tangle of routes while fellow travelers streamed around him like water around a boulder. "You look properly confused," observed a voice to his left. A young man with spiky blue hair and multiple piercings gestured at the map. "American, yeah. First time in London?" Percy nodded, grateful for the assistance. "That obvious, huh? The Yankees cap was my first clue," the Londoner grinned, pointing to Percy's head. "Where are you headed?" "Central London," Percy replied, checking the address Chiron had given him. "Charing Cross Road. Bookshops, is it? Tourist stuff." The blue-haired local traced a route on the map with his finger. "Take the Piccadilly line to Leicester Square, then it's a quick walk. Can't miss it." "Thanks," Percy said, adjusting his backpack. "Any tips for not looking like a complete tourist?" The guy laughed. "Walk fast, look annoyed, and never, ever stand on the left side of the escalator. That's for walking only." "Got it. Move fast, be grumpy. You'll fit right in," the Londoner assured him before disappearing into the crowd. Navigating the turnstiles and finding the right platform, Percy soon discovered that "Mind the Gap" wasn't just a quirky phrase printed on souvenirs but an actual announcement blaring through the stations. The train was packed with morning commuters, most absorbed in their phones or newspapers, creating a cocoon of practiced indifference. As the train lurched forward, Percy found himself squeezed between a businessman in a pinstriped suit and a teenager with headphones blaring music loud enough for everyone in the vicinity to hear the bass line. No one made eye contact. Everyone seemed to have mastered the art of occupying minimal space while mentally existing elsewhere. Percy tried to mimic their detached expressions, but his ADHD made it nearly impossible not to notice everything: the advertisements for West End shows, the mix of accents around him, the subtle shifts in the train's momentum. His thoughts drifted to Annabeth. She'd be waking up at Camp Half-Blood right about now, probably already working on her designs for the ongoing reconstruction of Olympus. He missed her strategic mind. She would have had a detailed plan for this mission, complete with contingencies and backup contingencies. Percy's approach was more improvisational. The further the train traveled into the heart of London, the more Percy became aware of a strange sensation, a prickling at the back of his neck, like static electricity gathering in the air before a storm. His demigod senses, honed through years of monster encounters, were picking up on something. Magic, but not the familiar kind that surrounded Camp Half-Blood or emanated from the gods. This was different, more structured, more contained, yet undeniably powerful. "Leicester Square," announced the automated voice as the train slowed. Percy squeezed through the doors along with a flood of passengers, following signs for the exit while trying to pinpoint the source of the magical energy he was detecting. Emerging onto the bustling streets of London's theatre district, Percy oriented himself using the Maps app on his phone, a rare piece of technology he allowed himself to use, despite the risk of attracting monsters. The magical interference Chiron had mentioned seemed to be masking his demigod aura somewhat, which might buy him some time before the local monster population realized a son of Poseidon was in town. Following directions to Charing Cross Road, Percy walked with purpose, taking in the sights while remaining vigilant. The street was lined with bookshops and theaters, tourists and locals mingling on the sidewalks. But as he approached the middle section of the road, the strange magical energy intensified dramatically. Percy slowed his pace, focusing on the sensation. It was coming from between two shops, a large bookstore and a record shop. At first glance, there seemed to be nothing there, just a solid brick wall. But as Percy concentrated, the air between the establishments appeared to shimmer slightly, like heat rising from pavement on a summer day. Ordinary mortals walked past without a second glance, their eyes sliding from one shop to the next as if the space between didn't exist. But Percy's demigod vision detected something hidden beneath layers of what he could only describe as magical mist, not the mist he was familiar with, but something deliberately placed to conceal. Percy approached cautiously, reaching out with his senses rather than his hands. As he drew closer, a previously invisible establishment began to materialize before his eyes, a shabby-looking pub with a wooden sign swinging in a breeze that didn't seem to affect anything else on the street. The Leaky Cauldron. The name appeared on the weathered sign, accompanied by the image of a black cauldron with a crack that leaked a substance that seemed to move of its own accord. Percy blinked several times, but the image remained. This had to be related to the magical interference Chiron had mentioned. But what kind of magic could hide an entire building in plain sight? Even the mist couldn't create something from nothing, it merely distorted mortal perceptions of existing objects. Percy hesitated only briefly before pushing open the heavy wooden door. If he wanted answers about the demigod he was seeking, this mysterious establishment seemed like the place to start. The interior was dim and smoky, with the unmistakable buzz of multiple conversations happening at once. The patrons barely glanced up as Percy entered, a fact that immediately struck him as unusual. In his experience, entering any gathering place as a stranger usually warranted at least a few curious looks. The pub looked like something out of a medieval fantasy film, wooden beams crossed the ceiling, candles flickered in iron holders, and the patrons wore an eclectic mix of clothing that ranged from perfectly normal modern attire to what could only be described as robes. Actual, honest-to-God's robes, like something out of a Renaissance fair. Percy made his way to the bar, where a bald man with a face like a wrinkled walnut was wiping glasses with a cloth. "What'll it be?" the barkeeper asked, his British accent thick. "Just Percy faltered, realizing he had no idea what they served. "Water's fine." The barkeeper raised an eyebrow but filled a glass from a tap. "American, are you? Hogwarts business or just passing through?" Percy's mind raced. Hogwarts? The word meant nothing to him, but he sensed it was significant. Best to play it safe. "Just passing through," he replied casually, taking the water. "Actually, I'm looking for someone. Maybe you could help." The barkeeper's expression turned guarded. "Depends who you're asking after." Percy reached into his pocket and pulled out a small photograph Chiron had given him, a grainy image captured by a satyr who had sensed the powerful demigod signature. It showed a young man with dark hair and glasses, but his face wasn't clear. "Ever seen this guy around?" The barkeeper barely glanced at the photo before shaking his head. "Can't say I have. Lot of folks come through here." But Percy caught the flicker of recognition in the man's eyes, a tell that would have cost him dearly in a poker game. The barkeeper knew something. "You sure?" Percy pressed. "It's important. Look, son," the man leaned forward, lowering his voice, "if you're a reporter or looking to cause trouble, you'd best move along. We've had enough of that sort to last a lifetime." Percy was about to respond when the pub door swung open, admitting a gust of cool air and a tall, red-haired young man whose freckled face broke into a wide grin as he spotted someone across the room. "Harry! Over here," the newcomer called out. Percy's attention snapped toward the name. At a corner table, partially obscured by shadows, a young man around Percy's age stood up. Even in the dim light, Percy could make out the unruly black hair, round glasses, and, most notably, a faint scar on his forehead shaped like a lightning bolt. The demigod signature Percy had been tracking since leaving the underground intensified dramatically, centered on this unremarkable-looking guy in jeans and a faded sweatshirt. The magical energy surrounding him was unlike anything Percy had encountered, a swirling mixture of god-born power and something entirely different, something learned rather than inherited. Percy watched as the dark-haired young man greeted his red-headed friend, both of them oblivious to the son of Poseidon's scrutiny. So this was his target, Harry. No last name necessary, apparently, at least not in this crowd. Now came the tricky part, how to approach a potentially powerful demigod who had somehow survived to late adolescence without training, in a foreign country, surrounded by some kind of magical community Percy knew nothing about. Percy paid for his water and casually made his way toward the table where Harry and his friend had settled, positioning himself at a nearby empty table where he could observe without being obvious. From this distance, he could hear snippets of their conversation. "Ron, I'm telling you, Hermione's right," Harry was saying, his British accent confirming Percy's suspicions about his nationality. "Just because the Ministry's finally getting its act together doesn't mean we should let our guard down." "I know, mate," Ron replied, "but it's been 2 years since the battle. Don't you think you deserve a break? Even Auror training allows for the occasional pint." Percy filed away the unfamiliar terms, ministry, battle, Auror, for future reference. Clearly, he'd stumbled into something much more complex than a simple extraction mission. Their conversation continued, touching on people and places Percy didn't recognize, but the underlying tension in Harry's posture was unmistakable. This was someone who had seen battle, who lived with constant vigilance. Percy knew that stance all too well, he saw it in the mirror daily, and in the eyes of every demigod at Camp Half-Blood. As Percy contemplated his next move, the air suddenly chilled. The temperature in the pub dropped several degrees in seconds, causing conversations to stutter into silence. Frost began forming on the inside of the windows, and patrons' breath became visible in small clouds. Percy's hand instinctively moved to his pocket where Riptide waited. This wasn't natural weather, it was the harbinger of something monstrous. His eyes darted to Harry, who had also tensed, hand disappearing beneath his jacket. The pub's front door blasted open with supernatural force, splintering on its hinges as it crashed against the wall. Standing in the doorway was a figure that caused Percy's blood to run cold, and not just metaphorically. It resembled a woman, but her skin was ash-gray and cracked like ancient pottery. Her hair writhed like snakes, though thankfully, they weren't actual serpents. Percy had enough experience with Medusa to recognize the difference. Most disturbing were her eyes, black pools that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Where her feet should have touched the ground, there was only mist, as if her lower body dissolved into vapor. "Empausai," Percy muttered under his breath, recognizing the vampire-like demigoddess that served Hecate. But something was wrong, this creature appeared twisted, corrupted beyond its normal form, as if it had been tampered with by magic that didn't belong in its being. The pub erupted into chaos. Patrons scrambled away from the creature, some disappearing with loud cracking sounds, others drawing what Percy now realized were wands. Actual, magical wands. "Stupefy," shouted a wizard near the bar, sending a jet of red light toward the monster. The spell hit the Empausai square in the chest but seemed to dissolve into her body with no effect. She let out a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Your little sticks can't harm me," she hissed, her voice echoing unnaturally. "I've been upgraded." Her eyes locked onto Harry, who was now standing with what Percy recognized as a fighter's stance, wand extended. "The son of magic," the Empausai purred. "My new master will be pleased when I bring him your head." Percy didn't hesitate. He uncapped Riptide, the pen expanding into a 3-foot-long celestial bronze sword that glowed with a faint golden light. The sudden appearance of a sword drew gasps from nearby patrons, but Percy's focus remained on the monster. "Hey, ugly," he called, drawing the Empausai's attention. "I think you're a little out of your jurisdiction." The creature's head snapped toward him, nostrils flaring as she caught his scent. "A half-blood," she growled. "A son of Poseidon, no less. 2 prizes instead of 1. How fortunate." Percy moved forward, positioning himself between the monster and the rest of the pub. "You know how this ends," he said. "I've sent dozens of your sisters back to Tartarus." The Empausai's laughter turned derisive. "Those weaklings serve the old ways. I serve new masters now, those who understand how to bend the barriers between worlds." From the corner of his eye, Percy saw Harry flanking to the left, wand still raised. Their eyes met briefly, an unspoken communication passing between two warriors recognizing a kindred spirit. Harry gave a slight nod, and Percy understood, they would attack together. The Impausi lunged with unnatural speed, her hands transforming into bronze talons that slashed through the air toward Percy's chest. He deflected with Riptide, the celestial bronze connecting with her claws in a shower of golden sparks. The impact jarred his arms, revealing that whatever had upgraded this monster had also increased her strength. Incarcerus! Harry shouted from the side. Ropes materialized out of thin air, wrapping themselves around the Impausi's torso. She screeched in fury, the bindings slowing her for only seconds before she shredded them with her talons. Percy used the distraction to strike, slashing Riptide across the monster's midsection. The blade connected, drawing a howl of pain as golden ichor, the blood of immortals, spilled onto the pub floor. But instead of disintegrating as monsters typically did when struck with celestial bronze, the Impausi merely staggered back, her wound sealing itself with unnatural rapidity. What the? Percy barely had time to process this before the creature countered, moving with blinding speed to slam him against a nearby table. Wood splintered beneath his weight, and pain blossomed across his back. Percy! Harry called out, and Percy's brain registered two things simultaneously: first, that Harry somehow knew his name despite them never being introduced, and second, that the demigod was now directing his wand at the ceiling above the Impausi. Reducto! Harry's spell hit the ancient wooden beams overhead, sending a shower of debris raining down on the monster. As she raised her arms to shield herself, Percy rolled to his feet and thrust Riptide upward, driving the blade through her chest. The Impausi shrieked, a sound so piercing that glasses shattered throughout the pub. Golden ichor pulsed around Riptide's blade, but still she didn't disintegrate. "You cannot stop what's coming," she hissed, her face inches from Percy's. "The veil between worlds is thinning. Old magics and new are merging. He is calling all of Hecate's children home, one way or another." With a final push, Percy drove Riptide deeper. The Impausi's body began to crumble, not into the golden dust Percy was accustomed to, but into a mixture of ash and what looked like black sand. As the last of her form collapsed to the pub floor, the temperature in the room gradually returned to normal. Breathing heavily, Percy looked up to find Harry approaching cautiously, wand still raised but pointed slightly away, a gesture of tentative trust. "You know my name," Percy said, recapping Riptide and returning it to his pocket. Harry's green eyes, startlingly similar in intensity to Percy's sea-green ones, narrowed slightly. "Hermione scried you 3 days ago when we detected you crossing into British magical territory. American, carries a sword that appears from nowhere, survived a direct hit from a modified Inferius Impausi hybrid." He paused. "The question is, why are you looking for me?" Percy straightened, aware that the remaining pub patrons were watching their exchange with unconcealed interest. "I think we should talk somewhere private." "The ministry will be here any minute," Ron interjected, joining them. "Magical incident in a public space, they'll want statements, and they're still twitchy about unregistered foreign wizards." "I'm not exactly a wizard," Percy said. Harry and Ron exchanged glances. Grim old place, Harry decided. "Now." Before Percy could ask what that meant, Harry grabbed his arm while Ron took hold of Harry's shoulder. The world compressed around them, squeezing Percy through what felt like a too-tight rubber tube. His insides churned, vision blackening at the edges as the pressure increased unbearably. Then, just as suddenly, the pressure released. Percy staggered forward, fighting the urge to vomit as his senses recalibrated. They were standing in a dimly lit hallway of what appeared to be a very old, very gloomy house. "What?" Percy gasped, doubling over with his hands on his knees. "Was that?" "Apparition," Harry replied matter-of-factly. "Magical transportation. First time's always rough." "Little warning next time," Percy muttered, straightening as his nausea subsided. Ron pointed his wand at Percy, expression stern. "Before we go any further, I think you owe us some explanations. Starting with what exactly you are, and why that thing called you a son of Poseidon. Percy glanced between the two wizards, calculating his options. He'd found his target demigod far more quickly than anticipated, but the situation was more complicated than Chiron could have imagined. Harry was clearly no ordinary mortal, nor was he an untrained demigod. He was something else entirely, a wizard, apparently, with his own magical community, his own threats, his own world. It's a long story, Percy said finally. But here's the short version: I'm a demigod, the son of a mortal woman and the Greek god Poseidon. I was sent here to find another demigod whose signature we detected in London. He looked directly at Harry. I'm pretty sure that's you. Harry's expression remained guarded, but Percy caught a flicker of something in those green eyes, not surprise, exactly, but recognition. As if Percy's words had confirmed a long-held suspicion rather than revealed a shocking truth. Greek gods, Harry repeated slowly. Like myths. Olympus. Zeus. They're not myths, Percy said. They're real. They move with Western civilization, currently centered in America. And they still have children with mortals. Blimey, Ron whispered, lowering his wand slightly. You're serious. Always, Percy replied with a hint of a smile. But that's not my name. Neither wizard laughed at the weak joke, and Percy sighed. Look, I know how it sounds. But that monster back there? That was an Impausi, a servant of Hecate, the goddess of magic. Except something was wrong with it, something changed. At the mention of Hecate, Harry's posture shifted subtly. What makes you think I'm a demigod? The magical signature, Percy explained. Our camp director sensed it, powerful, but masked by some other form of magic. I'm guessing that's your wizard stuff. But underneath it is something more ancient, something god-born. He paused. Has anything ever happened around you that even your wizard friends couldn't explain? Powers that seemed different from theirs? Harry and Ron exchanged another meaningful glance. We should wait for Hermione, Harry said finally. She'll want to hear this. She's at the ministry, Ron reminded him. Won't be back till evening. Harry nodded, then turned back to Percy. I'm not saying I believe you, but given what just happened at the Leaky Cauldron, I'm willing to listen. But first, he raised his wand again, though not aggressively, I need to verify you're not under any enchantments or potions. Knock yourself out, Percy shrugged. Though I should warn you, magic tends to behave strangely around me sometimes. Harry murmured several incantations, moving his wand in complex patterns while colored light swirled around Percy before dissipating. He's clean, Harry concluded, lowering his wand. At least, no magic I recognize. Told you, Percy said. Different magical system. Different magical system, Ron echoed incredulously. Hermione's going to have a field day with this one. Harry gestured toward a door further down the hallway. Let's continue this in the kitchen. I think we could all use a drink, non-alcoholic, he added, seeing Percy's expression. And then you can tell us exactly what a demigod is doing in London, looking for me. As they walked deeper into the strange house, Percy noticed the walls were lined with peculiar, moving portraits whose occupants whispered to each other as they passed. One particularly unpleasant-looking old woman in a frame covered with curtains seemed on the verge of shouting before Ron flicked his wand, closing the curtains more tightly. Don't mind her, Harry said, catching Percy's questioning look. Family portrait. Not the friendly kind. The kitchen was large and cavernous, with a long wooden table surrounded by mismatched chairs. Despite the gloomy atmosphere of the rest of the house, this room felt lived in, almost cozy, with copper pots hanging from the ceiling and a fire crackling in a large stone fireplace. Harry waved his wand, and 3 bottles of what looked like amber beer floated from a cupboard, landing gently on the table. Butterbeer, he explained, pushing one toward Percy. Non-alcoholic. Wizarding drink. Percy accepted the bottle cautiously, uncapping it to find a warm, butterscotch-scented liquid inside. He took a tentative sip and was pleasantly surprised by the sweet, warming sensation that spread through him. "Okay, that's good," he admitted. "Though I'm still partial to blue cherry Coke." "Blue?" Ron asked, looking perplexed. "Long story," Percy replied, taking another sip. "So, wizards. Actual wand-waving, spell-casting wizards. I've seen a lot of weird stuff, but this is new." "Says the bloke claiming to be the son of a sea god," Ron countered, though his tone had lost some of its earlier suspicion. "Fair point." Percy set down his bottle and leaned forward. "Let me start from the beginning. The Greek gods, all the ones from mythology, are real. They've been around for millennia, moving with the heart of Western civilization. These days, they're based in America, with Mount Olympus magically located above the Empire State Building in New York." "Of course it is," Harry muttered, but gestured for Percy to continue. "The gods still come down to the mortal world, still fall in love, or lust, with humans, and still have children. Those children are demigods, half human, half god. We inherit certain powers from our divine parents. I can control water, communicate with sea creatures, create mini hurricanes when I'm really pissed off. That kind of thing." "And the sword?" Harry asked. "The one that appeared from nowhere?" Percy pulled out Riptide in pen form. "This is Anaklusmos, Riptide. Celestial bronze, one of the few materials that can kill monsters. It returns to my pocket if I lose it, and mortals can't see it for what it really is. They might see a baseball bat or something else their minds can process." "Like a muggle-repelling charm," Ron observed. "If a muggle is what you call non-magical humans, then yeah, similar concept," Percy agreed. "We call it the mist, a magical veil that prevents mortals from seeing our world clearly." Harry's expression remained thoughtful. "You still haven't explained why you think I'm one of these demigods." Percy took a deep breath. This was the tricky part. "About a week ago, our camp director, a centaur named Chiron who's been training heroes for thousands of years, detected a powerful demigod signature in London. Usually, we find demigods when they're young, before monsters can track them down. The older you get, the stronger your scent becomes to monsters, making you a bigger target." "Scent?" Ron interrupted. "Monsters can smell demigod blood," Percy explained. "The more powerful your godly parent, the stronger your scent. By the time we're teenagers, it's like a beacon." "So why am I still alive?" Harry asked bluntly. "If what you're saying is true, and I've been giving off this scent for years, why haven't these monsters found me before?" "That's the million-drachma question," Percy said. "My theory? Your wizard magic has been masking it somehow. Creating interference. It's probably why we only detected you recently. Something changed, made your demigod signature stronger or more distinct." Harry and Ron exchanged another of those communicative glances that told Percy they were having an entire conversation without words. "2 years ago," Harry said finally. "After the Battle of Hogwarts. After I died and came back." Percy blinked. "You died?" "Temporarily," Harry clarified, as if that made it less bizarre. "I was hit with a killing curse, spent some time in a sort of limbo, then returned." "That would definitely do it," Percy said, mind racing. "Death and resurrection are big deals in any magical system. It probably altered your magical signature, made the demigod part more prominent." A heavy silence fell over the kitchen as Harry seemed to absorb this information. "So which god do you think is my parent?" he asked eventually. "Zeus? Apollo?" Percy shook his head. "Based on what I saw back at the pub, and what that Impauzai said about the son of magic, I'd put money on Hecate, goddess of magic, crossroads, and necromancy. It would explain your natural affinity for wizard magic, even though it's a different system than what she typically governs." "But I got my magic from my parents," Harry objected. "My mother was Muggle-born, a witch born to non-magical parents, and my father was a pure-blood wizard. That's why Voldemort. He trailed off, touching the lightning-shaped scar on his forehead unconsciously. Your mortal parents, Percy suggested gently. Your mother may have been your biological mother, but, no, Harry cut him off, standing abruptly. My mother died protecting me. My father died trying to save us both. They were wizards, not vessels for some goddess who couldn't be bothered to help when Voldemort came for us. The raw pain in Harry's voice struck Percy like a physical blow. He knew that feeling, the complicated emotions that came with divine parentage, the anger at absent godly parents who seemed to care only when it suited them. I understand, Percy said quietly. Believe me, I do. I didn't meet my father until I was 12, and even now, our relationship is complicated. Gods have ancient laws restricting how much they can interfere in their children's lives. It's messed up, but it's the reality we live with. Harry, Ron said cautiously, remember what Dumbledore always said about your mother's protection. How it was a magic Voldemort didn't understand. What if? Don't, Harry warned, but his voice had lost some of its edge. He sank back into his chair, running a hand through his perpetually messy hair. Even if, and it's a massive if, what you're saying is true, why come for me now? What's the point? Originally, to bring you to Camp Half-Blood for training, Percy admitted. It's a safe haven for demigods in Long Island, New York. But clearly, you've already got your own magical community, your own training. So now, I think it's about something else. He leaned forward. That Impau's eye was changed, enhanced somehow. She mentioned a master, someone calling Hecate's children home. And she specifically targeted you. I'm used to being targeted, Harry said dryly. Not like this, Percy insisted. This is different. Something's happening at the intersection of our worlds, Greek and whatever you call yourselves. Wizards, Ron supplied helpfully. Right. Someone or something is manipulating Greek monsters, combining them with your magic. And if they're specifically after children of Hecate. Percy let the implication hang in the air. Harry was silent for a long moment, absently tracing a pattern on the wooden table with his fingertip. When he looked up, his green eyes had hardened with resolve. I need to think about all this. And we need to wait for Hermione, she'll have insights neither Ron nor I would consider. He stood again, this time with purpose. In the meantime, we should check in with the ministry, find out if there have been other incidents like the one at the Leaky Cauldron. Ron, can you contact Kingsley? Ron nodded, rising as well. On it. Should I mention our guest's theory? Harry hesitated, then shook his head. Not yet. Let's gather more information first. Percy watched this exchange with growing respect for Harry's leadership. Whatever else he might be, this young wizard was clearly someone accustomed to crisis management and tactical thinking, qualities that aligned perfectly with what Percy would expect from a demigod. What about me? Percy asked, standing as well. I'm not exactly familiar with your world, but I know monsters. If more Impau's have been upgraded, you'll need someone who knows their weaknesses. Harry considered him for a moment, then nodded curtly. You'll stay here for now. Grimmauld Place is under the Fidelius charm, one of the strongest protection spells we have. If something really is targeting people like us, this is one of the safest places in Britain. Thanks, Percy said, genuinely relieved not to be ejected back onto unfamiliar London streets. I should probably contact my camp director too, let him know what's happening. No owls, Harry said immediately. If these monsters can track demigod, scent, they might be able to intercept magical communications too. Owls? Percy repeated, confused. Wizard Postal Service, Ron explained, as if it were perfectly normal. Harry's right though, better safe than sorry. I wasn't thinking of owls, Percy said, recovering. More like a rainbow and a golden drachma. Now it was the wizard's turn to look confused. Iris message, Percy clarified. The goddess Iris runs a divine communication service. Useful when cell phones act like monster homing beacons. Harry seemed to process this, then nodded again. Fine. But inside the house only. I'll show you to a room where you can, rainbow call your camp. As they made their way back through the gloomy hallway, Percy caught sight of more peculiar wizarding artifacts, a clock that showed locations instead of time, animated photographs in frames, and what appeared to be a disembodied house elf head mounted on the wall. So, Percy ventured, I'm guessing you're something of a big deal in wizard world? Based on how everyone at the pub recognized you, and that scar everyone keeps looking at. Harry's shoulders tensed momentarily before he forced them to relax. Something like that. Hey, I get it, Percy assured him. Prophecy kid. Saving the world. Been there, done that, got the bead necklace. A ghost of a smile flickered across Harry's face. Prophecy kid. That's one way to put it. The worst part is when they write songs about you, Percy continued, recognizing the familiar burden of unwanted fame that Harry seemed to carry. There's this Apollo cabin at camp that wrote this absolutely terrible ballad about me defeating Kronos. They rhymed Jackson with action at least 12 times. This time, Harry's smile was more genuine. The wizarding newspaper once ran a full-page spread theorizing that I was raising an army of dragons in secret. Were you? Would have been more interesting than what I was actually doing, which was studying for exams and trying not to get killed. They reached a small, dusty bedroom on the second floor. The wallpaper was peeling, but the room had clearly been recently cleaned, with fresh bedding on the narrow bed and a lamp that Harry lit with a casual flick of his wand. You can use this room, Harry said. Bathrooms down the hall. Make your rainbow call, but be careful what you say, we still don't know exactly what we're dealing with. Percy nodded. Thanks. For not, you know, hexing me into oblivion or whatever it is you wizard types do to trespassers. Don't thank me yet, Harry replied, but there was no malice in his tone. We've had people show up claiming to be all sorts of things. Friends, relatives, reincarnated wizards from the past. After a while, you develop a sense for who's genuine and who's full of it. He paused at the doorway. You saved people at the leaky cauldron today. That counts for something. After Harry left, Percy sat on the edge of the bed, processing everything that had happened since his arrival in London mere hours ago. He'd found his target demigod far more quickly than anticipated, but the situation was vastly more complex than anyone at Camp Half-Blood could have imagined. A hidden society of wand-wielding wizards. Monsters being magically enhanced. And Harry Potter, apparently famous, obviously powerful, and potentially a son of Hecate who had no idea of his divine heritage. Percy pulled a small spray bottle of water from his backpack, a tool he'd started carrying after the giant war for emergency iris messages. Creating a fine mist in the air, he directed it toward the lamp, where the light refracted into a faint rainbow. Fishing a golden drachma from his pocket, Percy tossed it into the mist. "Oh Iris, goddess of the rainbow, accept my offering. Show me Chiron at Camp Half-Blood." The mist shimmered, colors swirling until they formed the image of the centaur in his office at the big house. Chiron was in his wheelchair form, the magical apparatus that concealed his horse half when needed, poring over ancient scrolls at his desk. Percy, the centaur looked up in surprise. "You've reached London safely, I see." "Safe is relative," Percy replied. "I found our mystery demigod, but Chiron, you're not going to believe what I've discovered." As Percy recounted his day, the hidden wizarding pub, the Empowsai attack, Harry Potter and his apparent connection to Hecate, Chiron's expression grew increasingly troubled. "A society of wand users," the centaur murmured when Percy finished. "I've heard whispers over the centuries, but their community has remained remarkably isolated, even from Olympian influence." "So you knew about them?" Percy asked, a hint of accusation in his voice. "Not with any certainty," Chiron clarified. "There have always been different magical traditions throughout human history. Most are simply mortal attempts to harness the ambient magic of the world. But a very few have legitimate connections to the divine. And these wizards? If your Harry Potter truly is a son of Hecate, it suggests the wizarding community may have originated from her blessing, perhaps diluted through generations, evolving into something distinct from traditional demigod abilities. Percy frowned. But why wouldn't Hecate claim her children? And why hasn't anyone at camp ever mentioned wizard relatives? The gods have many aspects, Percy, many ways they've influenced humanity through the ages. Hecate especially has always been independent in how she manages her domain. Chiron shifted in his wheelchair, expression thoughtful. As for why we haven't encountered wizards at camp, perhaps their magic protects them from monsters in ways that make our intervention unnecessary. Until now, it seems. Something's changed, Percy agreed. The Empowsi mentioned someone calling Hecate's children home. And she was enhanced somehow, resistant to celestial bronze. Most concerning, Chiron's brow furrowed deeply. Percy, I believe your mission has expanded beyond a simple extraction. You must determine what connection exists between these enhanced monsters and the wizarding world. And you must help Harry understand his heritage. If he truly is a son of Hecate, his power could be pivotal in whatever conflict is brewing. He didn't exactly welcome the news, Percy admitted. Can't blame him. Finding out you're a demigod isn't usually a cause for celebration, especially when you've already got a complicated life. Give him time, Chiron advised. And Percy? Be careful. If someone is indeed tampering with the natural order of monsters, combining Greek and wizarding magic, the potential for catastrophe is significant. When isn't it? Percy sighed. I'll update you when I know more. The iris message faded, leaving Percy alone in the dimly lit bedroom. Outside the window, London's skyline was visible through a gap in heavy curtains, the afternoon sun struggling to penetrate persistent cloud cover. Somewhere in that sprawling city, someone was manipulating forces they likely didn't fully understand, creating hybrid threats that could endanger both the wizarding world and the world of the gods. Percy lay back on the bed, suddenly aware of his exhaustion. Jet lag, dimensional travel, monster fighting, and interdimensional magical politics all in one day, even by his standards, it was a lot. As he drifted toward sleep, Percy's last coherent thought was that Annabeth would find this wizard situation absolutely fascinating. And she'd probably have figured out the whole mystery by now, complete with color-coded notes and a strategic plan. He was going to have one heck of a story to tell her when he got home, assuming, of course, that he survived whatever was coming next. Percy woke to the sound of voices drifting up from downstairs, not just Harry and Ron's now, but a female voice as well, speaking with rapid intensity. Night had fallen outside the window, the bedroom now illuminated only by moonlight filtering through the dusty curtains. Splashing water on his face from a basin on the dresser, instantly refreshing him in the way only water could for a son of Poseidon, Percy made his way downstairs toward the kitchen. The voices grew clearer as he approached. Can't possibly be serious, Harry. The implications would be enormous, the female voice was saying. I know how it sounds, Hermione, Harry replied, but you didn't see him fighting that thing. And his sword, it was like nothing I've ever seen. Bronze, but it glowed. Celestial bronze, Percy said, stepping into the doorway. Mine from Mount Olympus, forged with Cyclops techniques. One of the few metals that can harm monsters and immortals. 3 pairs of eyes turned to him. Harry and Ron he recognized, but the third person was new, a young woman with bushy brown hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to be analyzing Percy with uncomfortable intensity. You must be Hermione, Percy said, extending his hand. Percy Jackson, son of Poseidon. Nice to meet you. Hermione hesitated briefly before shaking his hand. Hermione Granger, Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Her grip was firm, her gaze unwavering. Harry and Ron have been telling me about your claims. Not claims, Percy corrected mildly. Facts. Though I get the skepticism, I'd feel the same way if wizards showed up at Camp Half-Blood talking about wands and magical schools. That's just it, Hermione said, gesturing to a stack of heavy, ancient-looking books on the table. I've been researching since Ron contacted me, and there are indeed references to Greek deities in the oldest wizarding texts. Hecate especially is mentioned in relation to the origins of wand lore, but always as a figure of mythology, not as a literal progenitor of magical bloodlines. The gods have a way of writing themselves out of mortal history when it suits them, Percy said, taking a seat at the table. Trust me, they're very real. Annoying, powerful, and very, very real. So you claim Harry is a demigod? A son of this goddess Hecate? Hermione pressed, looking skeptical. The evidence fits, Percy shrugged. His natural aptitude for magic, his power level, the fact that monsters are specifically targeting him. Plus, there's what the Empowsi said about the son of magic. But Harry's parents, Hermione began. Were James and Lily Potter, Harry interrupted firmly. Whatever else might be true, they raised me, or would have, and died protecting me. That doesn't change. Percy recognized the defensive tone. No one's trying to take that away from you, he said carefully. Being a demigod doesn't erase your mortal family. If anything, it adds context. Maybe explains some things that never quite made sense before. Harry's expression remained guarded, but Percy saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, the look of someone reconsidering long-held truths. There's something else, Ron said, breaking the tension. Kingsley, he's basically the wizard government leader, he added for Percy's benefit, says there have been 3 other incidents in the past week. Creatures that didn't respond to normal spells, that seemed to be hybrids of some kind. Were there any patterns to the attacks? Percy asked, immediately alert. All in locations with high magical concentration, Hermione answered, her academic demeanor taking over despite her skepticism. Hogsmeade Village near Hogwarts School, Godric's Hollow, where my parents died, Harry interjected quietly. And Diagon Alley, before today's incident, Hermione finished. The Department of Magical Creatures is baffled. These entities don't match anything in our registries. Because they're not wizard monsters, Percy explained. They're Greek monsters, but modified somehow. Enhanced with what I'm guessing is dark wizard magic. Death Eaters, Harry said grimly. It has to be. The remnants of Voldemort's followers, looking for new sources of power after their master's defeat. Percy looked between the 3 wizards, noting their grim expressions. I'm guessing this Voldemort was bad news. The darkest wizard of our time, Hermione said. He terrorized both the wizarding and muggle worlds, murdered countless people, and was obsessed with blood purity and immortality. Harry defeated him 2 years ago in the Battle of Hogwarts. But some of his followers escaped, Ron added. We've been tracking them down, but a few of the worst are still at large. Like Rodolphus Lestrange, Harry said, eyes darkening. Bellatrix's husband. After she died in the battle, he disappeared completely. Until 3 weeks ago, when there was a sighting in Greece. Percy's pulse quickened. Greece? Where exactly? A place called Mount Parnassus, Hermione replied. The Auror office received intelligence that he was spotted near ancient ruins there, performing some kind of ritual. Delphi, Percy breathed. The ancient oracle of Delphi was located on Mount Parnassus. It was sacred to Apollo, but Hecate had influence there too, as goddess of crossroads and liminal spaces. Harry leaned forward. You think this Lestrange somehow tapped into Greek magic at this oracle site? It would explain the hybrid monsters, Percy nodded. He's found a way to merge wizard magic with Greek power, maybe through some kind of ritual invoking Hecate. But why target Harry specifically? Hermione asked. If he didn't know about this demigod connection. Maybe he does know, Percy suggested. You said this guy was married to someone important to Voldemort. What if he discovered something about Harry's true heritage, something Voldemort either missed or kept to himself? A heavy silence fell over the kitchen as the three wizards exchanged meaningful looks. The prophecy, Harry said finally. The original prophecy about me and Voldemort. It said, neither can live while the other survives, and referred to me having power the Dark Lord knows not. Everyone assumed that meant love, or your connection through the Horcrux, Hermione said slowly, but what if? What if it meant my connection to Hecate? Harry finished. A divine heritage that Voldemort, for all his research into immortality and ancient magic, never fully understood? Percy watched as the pieces seemed to click into place for Harry, his exceptional power, his survival against impossible odds, the strange affinity he'd always felt for magic that went beyond normal wizarding talent. If Lestrange discovered this, Ron said grimly, he might believe he could succeed where Voldemort failed by specifically targeting the God-born aspect of your power. And he's using corrupted servants of Hecate to do it, Percy added. Which explains why the Empowsi said something about calling Hecate's children home. He's not just after Harry, he might be targeting all descendants of Hecate, trying to harness or eliminate their power. Hermione had been scribbling notes furiously as they talked. Now she looked up, eyes bright with the intensity Percy recognized from Annabeth when she was connecting intellectual dots. The Ministry's archives might have more information, she said. There are ancient texts on magical lineages that aren't available to the public. And we should contact Bill, he's a cursebreaker, she explained to Percy, with expertise in ancient magical sites. And I should check with my friend Annabeth, Percy said. She's a daughter of Athena, basically a walking encyclopedia on Greek mythology and architecture. If there's a connection between Delphi and what's happening now, she'll know it. Harry stood, decision made. We'll split up. Hermione, you and Ron check the Ministry archives. I'll contact Bill and see what he knows about Mount Parnassus. Percy, I'll try to reach Annabeth, Percy said. And I should check in with Chiron again, let him know about these other attacks. We meet back here in the morning, Harry concluded. If Lestrange is really behind this, we need to move quickly. He was one of Voldemort's most fanatic followers, and he's had 2 years to plan whatever this is. As they prepared to separate, Percy caught Harry alone in the hallway. You okay? He asked quietly. Finding out you might be a demigod on top of everything else, it's a lot to process. Harry was silent for a moment, his expression unreadable in the dim light of the hallway. My whole life, he said finally, I've been defined by things I never chose. My parents' death. This scar. Being the chosen one. If what you're saying is true, it's just one more thing that was decided for me before I was born. Percy nodded, understanding all too well. I get it. When I found out who my father was, I was angry. Felt like my whole life had been a lie, like I was just a pawn in some cosmic game. And in some ways, I was. How did you get past it? Harry asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. I didn't, not completely, Percy admitted. But I realized something important, being a demigod explains who I am, but it doesn't define who I become. That part's still up to me. He smiled slightly. Plus, the water powers are pretty cool. A reluctant smile tugged at Harry's lips. I've already got magic. Not sure what additional perks come with being Hecate's son. Guess we'll find out, Percy said. If you want to, that is. No one's forcing you to embrace this heritage, gods know plenty of demigods have rejected their divine parents over the centuries. Harry considered this, then nodded thoughtfully. Let's focus on stopping Lestrange first. Then, we'll see. As Harry headed upstairs, Percy found himself reflecting on the strange parallels between them. Both thrust into heroic roles by prophecy and parentage. Both leaders who carried the weight of others' expectations. Both powerful in ways that set them apart from their peers. If Harry truly was a son of Hecate, his potential was enormous, the magical knowledge of the wizarding world combined with the raw power of divine heritage. But Percy also understood the burden such power carried, the target it painted on one's back. Whatever came next, one thing was certain, the worlds of demigods and wizards had collided, and neither would be the same again. Percy just hoped they'd all live long enough to figure out what that meant. Chapter 2, Two Worlds Collide. Morning light filtered through the grimy windows of number 12 Grimmauld Place, casting long shadows across the kitchen where Percy sat nursing a cup of what the wizards called tea. He'd never been much of a tea drinker, give him coffee any day, but when in magical Britain. He studied the unfamiliar room in daylight, noting details he'd missed the previous evening, scorch marks on one wall from what looked like magical mishaps, a row of mismatched mugs hanging from hooks, one of which occasionally whistled, and a clock with hands pointing to locations rather than times. The wizarding world was both familiar and utterly foreign, reminding Percy of how he'd felt when first discovering Camp Half-Blood, that sense of finding a missing puzzle piece he hadn't known was missing. The sound of footsteps announced Harry's arrival before he appeared in the doorway, already dressed in what Percy was coming to recognize as casual wizard attire, jeans and a sweater, but with a cloak-like robe thrown over top. "Morning," Harry said, flicking his wand at the kettle, which immediately began to steam. "Sleep all right?" "Well enough," Percy replied, though in truth he'd spent half the night sending Iris messages and the other half wrestling with demigod dreams that made even less sense than usual. "Any word from your friends?" Harry shook his head, summoning a mug that flew from a cabinet into his waiting hand. "Hermione sent her Patronus at dawn, said she and Ron had found something interesting in the Ministry archives and would be here by 8. He glanced at Percy. "A Patronus is a magical messenger," he explained. "Looks like a silver animal." "Right," Percy nodded, adding it to his growing mental list of wizard terminology. "I managed to contact Annabeth last night. She's looking into the Delphi connection, but communications are spotty. Something's interfering with Iris messages, like static on a magical radio." Harry's expression turned thoughtful as he sat across from Percy. "The same interference that made it difficult for your camp to locate me initially?" "Probably. Chiron thinks someone's deliberately disrupting the connection between our worlds." Percy paused. "How are you doing with everything? The whole demigod bombshell?" Harry stared into his tea, his face unreadable. "Still processing. I've had identity revelations before, finding out I was a wizard, discovering I had a piece of Voldemort's soul inside me, but this." He shook his head. "It's different. Because it changes who you thought your parents were," Percy guessed softly. Harry's green eyes, so similar to Percy's own in intensity if not in color, flashed up. "I've spent my whole life hearing how I have my mother's eyes, my father's hair. Their sacrifice protected me. It's the foundation of everything." Percy nodded, understanding. "For what it's worth, I don't think this changes that. If your mom was your biological mother, then your connection to her is still exactly what you've always believed. As for your dad..." Percy chose his words carefully. "Some demigods have mortal fathers who raise them as their own, knowing they're not biologically related. It doesn't make them less of a father." Harry seemed to consider this, his expression softening slightly. "James Potter died trying to protect me and my mother. Whatever the biological truth, that makes him my father in every way that matters." "Exactly," Percy agreed. "Being a demigod doesn't erase your mortal family. It just adds complications. Like, a lot of complications. Usually in the form of monsters trying to kill you." A reluctant smile tugged at Harry's lips. "I've got plenty of experience with that part already." Before they could continue, a loud crack echoed through the kitchen. Percy leapt to his feet, hand instinctively reaching for Riptide, but Harry remained calm as Ron and Hermione materialized in the center of the room, arms laden with books and scrolls. "Sorry we're late," Hermione said breathlessly, dumping her load onto the table. "The archives were more extensive than we expected, and then Ron insisted on stopping for breakfast." "You were the one who said you couldn't think without food," Ron protested, setting down his own stack of materials more carefully. "And then we had to dodge Fletchley from Magical Cooperation, who's been pestering me about international cauldron thickness regulations," Hermione continued as if Ron hadn't spoken, already sorting through the materials with practiced efficiency. Percy caught Harry's eye, a silent acknowledgement passing between them, the familiar exasperation and fondness one felt watching close friends bicker. It reminded Percy of Annabeth and Grover's good-natured arguments, a pang of homesickness briefly tightening his chest. "What did you find?" Harry asked, redirecting Hermione's focus. She pushed her bushy hair back from her face, excitement evident in her expression. "Harry, this is extraordinary. The oldest texts in the Ministry archives, ones dating back to before Hogwarts was founded, contain explicit references to Hecate not as mythology, but as the source of wizard magic." "What kind of references?" Percy leaned forward, intrigued. Hermione carefully opened a brittle scroll protected by a preservation charm. "This is Magic's Origins by Adelina the Wise, written circa 500 CE. She describes a covenant between the goddess of crossroads and the earliest wizarding families." Hermione's finger traced ancient text as she read, "Thus did Hecate, mistress of magic, grant her blessing upon those who would honor the old ways, that they might wield a portion of her power through implements of her sacred woods." "Wands," Harry murmured. "Exactly," Hermione nodded vigorously. According to this text, wand-based magic originated as a gift from Hecate to chosen mortal families. Not demigods specifically, but blessed humans who became the progenitors of wizarding bloodlines. "That tracks with what Chiron told me," Percy said. He suspected the wizarding community might have started with Hecate's blessing, passed down through generations. Ron, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, pulled a heavy book from the bottom of his stack. "But there's more. This genealogy text traces the oldest wizarding families, what we call the Sacred 28, and links them to specific ancient sites of power." He flipped to a marked page. "The Potter line is connected to Hecate through a reference to the thrice-blessed Potter who shaped vessels for the goddess's sacred fires." Harry's expression shifted from skepticism to stunned disbelief. "You're saying my family name actually comes from someone who made pottery for Hecate?" "Ritual vessels," Hermione clarified. "Extremely powerful magical artifacts, according to this text. The implication is that the original potter was specially chosen by Hecate for this sacred task." "So Harry's connection to Hecate might go beyond just being her son," Percy reasoned. "His entire family line could have been devoted to her service for generations." "Which would explain why his magical signature is so powerful," Ron added. "Both divine blood and an ancient magical lineage." Harry stood abruptly, pacing the kitchen with the restless energy of someone trying to physically process overwhelming information. "This is a lot." "There's one more thing," Hermione said, her voice gentling. "We found references to a specific type of child of Hecate, one born to a witch who was herself descended from Hecate's blessed bloodlines." Harry stopped pacing, turning to face her. "What about them?" "They're called twice blessed in the ancient texts," Hermione explained. "Incredibly rare, occurring perhaps once in a millennium. They're said to possess the ability to bridge magical disciplines, to see and manipulate the threads of magic itself rather than just wielding it." A heavy silence fell over the kitchen as the implications settled around them. Percy watched Harry carefully, recognizing the expression of someone whose entire self-perception was being rewritten in real time. "That doesn't sound like me," Harry said finally. "I've never been particularly brilliant at magic." "Not like you, Hermione. Academic aptitude isn't the same as raw magical potential," Hermione countered gently. "Think about it, Harry. Your Patronus at 13, a fully corporeal Patronus that drove away 100 Dementors. Learning spells in the DA that were years beyond your education level. Surviving the killing curse, twice. And your wand," Ron added quietly. "Ollivander always said it was unusual, holly and phoenix feather, a powerful combination. What if it was responding to both sides of your heritage?" Harry sank back into his chair, looking dazed. "I always thought those things happened because of circumstances, or luck, or—" He trailed off. "The prophecy called you the Dark Lord's equal," Hermione said. What if that equality wasn't just about being marked as his opponent, but about the true source and nature of your magic? Percy, feeling like an intruder on a deeply personal moment, cleared his throat. Not to interrupt this revelation, but we should probably also discuss what Annabeth found. It might connect to all this. 3 pairs of eyes turned to him expectantly. She confirmed that Mount Parnassus was a major crossroads between Greek and Chthonic magic, the kind Hecate specializes in. The oracle at Delphi was primarily Apollo's domain, but beneath it were ancient chambers dedicated to older gods, including Hecate. Percy leaned forward. If this Lestrange guy performed a ritual there, he might have accessed pathways between magical realms that have been closed for centuries. Could that be how he's creating these hybrid monsters? Ron asked. Percy nodded. Annabeth thinks he's using wizard magic to bind Greek monsters to his will, possibly by exploiting Hecate's dominion over both realms. Traditional methods of defeating either type of creature alone wouldn't work against the hybrids. Which explains why my stunners had no effect on the Empauzi yesterday, and why your sword didn't immediately destroy it, Harry concluded. Exactly. We need both approaches, working in tandem. Percy tapped his fingers thoughtfully against the table. There's something else that's bothering me, though. The Empauzi said Lestrange was calling Hecate's children home. If he's targeting descendants of Hecate, he's not just after me, Harry finished grimly. He's after all wizards with particularly strong connections to her. The oldest families, Hermione gasped, making the connection. The attacks, Godric's Hollow, Hogsmeade, Diagon Alley, they're all places with connections to the founding magical families. Ron paled. Bloody hell. That means, a silver terrier burst through the kitchen wall, glowing with ethereal light. When it spoke, it was in the voice of Ron's father, attack at Ottery St. Catchpole. Multiple casualties. Strange creatures. Ministry responding. Stay where you are. The magical messenger dissolved, leaving stunned silence in its wake. Ottery St. Catchpole, Ron whispered, horror dawning on his face. The Burrow. My family. Harry was already on his feet, wand drawn. We need to go. Now. Wait, Percy interjected, standing as well. If these are the same hybrid monsters we faced yesterday, charging in unprepared is suicide. That's my family. Ron shouted, face flushed with fear and anger. I understand, Percy said firmly, meeting Ron's gaze. Believe me, I do. But we need a plan. These creatures are resistant to both our methods individually. We need to coordinate. Harry placed a hand on Ron's shoulder, steadying him. Percy's right. We go together, with a strategy. He turned to Percy. How do we kill these things effectively? Percy uncapped Riptide, the celestial bronze sword expanding in his hand. Coordinated attacks. Your magic to contain and weaken them, my blade to deliver the killing blow. Or vice versa, I can distract them while you target their vulnerabilities with specific spells. Hermione, already gathering her wand and a small beaded bag, nodded. Incarcerus for binding, followed by celestial bronze. Or freezing charms to immobilize them. What about Greek fire? Harry asked Percy. I've read about it, supposedly burns even underwater. Percy raised an eyebrow, impressed by Harry's knowledge. Effective, but I don't have any with me. It's not exactly TSA approved for international flights. I can conjure magical fire, Harry said. Would that work in combination with your sword? Worth trying, Percy nodded. Especially if you channel it through Hecate's power rather than just wizard techniques. I don't know how to do that, Harry admitted. You might not need to consciously access it, Percy said. In demigods, divine abilities often manifest instinctively in moments of extreme need. Just, focus on the source of your magic, not just the wand movement. Ron, who had been practically vibrating with impatience, grabbed Harry's arm. Can we have the magical theory lesson later? My family is under attack. Right, Harry nodded decisively. We'll apparate to the edge of the Burrow's property. Percy, you'll need to side along with me since you've never been there. Side along? Percy questioned. Magical teleportation, Hermione explained quickly. Hold on to Harry's arm firmly and, well, try not to be sick when we arrive. Percy barely had time to tighten his grip on Riptide before Harry grabbed his arm. The world compressed around him, squeezing him through what felt like a rubber tube far too small for human passage. Just as the pressure became unbearable, reality snapped back into focus. They stood on a hilltop overlooking a scene of chaos. Below them, a strangely constructed house that looked like several buildings stacked haphazardly atop one another was surrounded by creatures that made Percy's blood run cold. Even from a distance, he could identify several types of Greek monsters, empausi like the one from the leaky cauldron, but also what looked like Laestrygonian giants and something with multiple heads that could only be a hydra. Around them, wizards in official-looking robes fired spells that seemed to barely slow the creatures down. The Burrow, Ron whispered, horror in his voice. They're destroying it. Without waiting for the others, Ron charged down the hill, wand extended. Harry swore under his breath and sprinted after him, with Hermione and Percy close behind. As they drew nearer, Percy got a better look at the monsters, and what he saw confirmed his worst fears. Each creature glowed with an unnatural purple aura, and their eyes shone with the same light. The Hydra, typically a straightforward monster despite its regenerating heads, moved with unnatural precision, its attacks coordinated rather than instinctual. They're being controlled. Percy shouted to the others as they ran. Someone's directing them with magic. Lestrange must be nearby, Harry called back. We need to find him. They reached the edge of the battle as a Laestrygonian giant hurled what appeared to be a flaming cannonball toward the upper story of the burrow. Ron deflected it with a shield charm, the projectile exploding harmlessly in the air. Ron! A middle-aged red-headed woman Percy assumed was Ron's mother emerged from behind a magical barrier, relief and fear mingling on her face. I told your father to tell you to stay away. Like that was going to happen, Ron replied, firing a spell at an approaching empausi. The creature staggered but quickly recovered. Percy surveyed the battlefield, counting at least a dozen monsters of various types. Ministry wizards were maintaining defensive positions but clearly unable to advance against creatures their spells couldn't effectively harm. We need to coordinate with them, Percy told Harry, indicating the Ministry forces. Show them how to fight these things. Harry nodded grimly. Cover me. As Percy engaged the nearest empausi, driving it back with Riptide's golden arc, Harry sprinted toward a tall, dark-skinned wizard who seemed to be directing the Ministry's defense. Kingsley. Harry called. Normal spells won't work. You need to combine attacks. The wizard, Kingsley, deflected a projectile with remarkable calm before turning to Harry. Explain quickly, Potter. These are Greek monsters enhanced with dark magic, Harry said rapidly. Magical attacks weaken them, but they need to be finished with celestial bronze. He pointed to Percy, who was demonstrating this principle by slicing through an empausi after Hermione had temporarily petrified it. Kingsley assessed the situation with the speed of a seasoned commander. Coordinate your friends' attacks with our stunners. I'll reorganize our defense. As Kingsley began issuing new orders to his team, Percy found himself fighting alongside wizards who, despite their initial skepticism, quickly adapted to the hybrid combat strategy. Percy would engage a monster directly, weakening it with Riptide, while wizard partners hit it with concentrated spells that seemed far more effective once the celestial bronze had pierced their magical protection. Across the yard, Ron had reached his family and was now standing protectively before several red-headed individuals who were maintaining shields around the burrow. Hermione had joined Harry and Kingsley, her encyclopedic knowledge of spells proving invaluable as she directed Ministry wizards to use specific incantations that seemed particularly effective against certain monster types. Percy had just dispatched his third empausi when he heard a sound that chilled his blood, the distinctive hiss of the Hydra as it turned its attention toward him. All 7 of its heads swiveled in unison, purple fire dripping from its jaws. "Percy!" Harry shouted from nearby. "The Hydra, don't cut off the heads." "Yeah, I'm familiar with the concept," Percy called back, rolling to avoid a jet of flame. "2 grow back unless you cauterize the stumps. I've got the fire if you can get close enough." Harry was already moving toward him, wand raised. The Hydra charged, its multiple heads striking from different angles with terrifying coordination. Percy dodged the first 2 attacks but was caught by a third head that slammed into his side, sending him tumbling across the yard. He scrambled to his feet, ignoring the pain blooming along his ribs. Harry reached his side, eyes blazing with determination. "Together," he said simply. Percy nodded, an unspoken plan forming between them. As the Hydra attacked again, Percy charged directly at it, riptide extended. The monster reared back, momentarily confused by the direct assault. Percy took advantage of its hesitation, sliding beneath its guard and slashing at the base of one neck, not severing it completely, but wounding it badly. "Now!" Percy shouted. Harry's wand movement was fluid, almost instinctual, but what emerged wasn't ordinary wizard fire. Instead, green flames shot from his wand, intense, ancient, and unmistakably divine in origin. The fire struck the wounded neck, and the Hydra screamed in a dozen voices as the magical flame seared the wound, preventing regeneration. "It's working!" Percy called, already positioning himself for the next head. Harry's expression showed momentary surprise at the unusual color of his fire, but he recovered quickly. Together, they fell into a deadly rhythm, Percy wounding each neck, Harry cauterizing with the green flame that could only be Hecate's sacred fire. One by one, the Hydra's heads were disabled until only the immortal central head remained, thrashing in fury. "The last one can't be killed conventionally," Percy warned, breathing heavily from exertion. Harry nodded, eyes narrowed in concentration. "Binding, then. Incarceris maxima." Thick, magically reinforced ropes shot from Harry's wand, wrapping around the Hydra's remaining head and body, immobilizing it against the ground. As the creature struggled against its bonds, Percy drove riptide through its immortal heart, not enough to kill it permanently, but sufficient to banish its essence temporarily. The Hydra dissolved into golden dust, but unlike normal monster dissipation, the dust swirled with that strange purple energy before reluctantly fading away. "They're definitely enhanced," Percy confirmed, wiping sweat from his brow. "Normal monsters don't fight their own dissolution like that." Before Harry could respond, a scream tore through the battlefield. They turned to see Hermione pointing toward the edge of the property, where a tall, gaunt figure stood partially concealed by trees. Even at a distance, Percy could feel the malevolent energy radiating from the man, dark wizard magic intertwined with something older, something Greek. "Lestrange," Harry snarled, his wand immediately training on the distant figure. Rodolphus Lestrange, for it could only be him, raised his own wand in a mocking salute before operating away with a crack that seemed to reverberate through the very ground. As he disappeared, the remaining monsters faltered, the purple light in their eyes flickering as if a connection had been severed. "Now!" Kingsley shouted to his forces. While they're disoriented. The combined attack of Ministry wizards and Percy's celestial bronze made short work of the remaining creatures. Within minutes, the battlefield was littered with nothing but golden dust and the occasional patch of that unsettling purple residue. As the immediate danger passed, Percy joined Harry, Ron, and Hermione near the burrow, where Ron was hugging his mother fiercely. "Everyone's accounted for," the woman was saying, relief evident in her voice. "Your father's inside with George and Percy. Charlie was up on the roof, he's got some burns but nothing serious. Bill and Fleur weren't here, thank goodness." Ron turned to introduce Percy to his mother, but she was already eyeing him with curious appraisal. "So you're the American with the special sword," she said, extending her hand. "Molly Weasley. Thank you for helping protect my family and home." "Percy Jackson," he replied, shaking her hand. "And I think it was a team effort." "Percy," she repeated, a small smile forming. We've got one of those too, though I dare say you're a bit more exciting than my third son. Don't tell him I said that. Despite the gravity of the situation, Percy found himself warming to Molly immediately. She reminded him of his own mother, that same fierce protectiveness wrapped in warmth. Harry, meanwhile, was conferring with Kingsley. He was controlling them remotely, Harry was saying. Some kind of modified Imperius curse adapted to work on monsters. An unsettling development, Kingsley replied, his deep voice troubled. And these creatures, you say they're from Greek mythology? Not mythology, Percy interjected, joining their conversation. They're very real, just usually confined to a different magical sphere than yours. Kingsley studied Percy with shrewd eyes. Mr. Jackson. Hermione has given me a brief explanation of your situation. Under normal circumstances, the Ministry would have serious questions about an undocumented magical individual operating on British soil. But these aren't normal circumstances, Harry pointed out. Indeed not, Kingsley agreed. Which is why I'm officially classifying you as a special consultant to the Auror office for the duration of this crisis. He produced an official-looking badge from his robes, handing it to Percy. This will prevent any awkward questions from other ministry departments. Percy accepted the badge, slightly bemused by the formal bureaucracy even in the face of monster attacks. Thanks. So what's our next move? The attack pattern is clear now, Hermione said, joining them with Ron at her side. Lestrange is targeting locations with strong connections to ancient wizarding bloodlines, specifically those with historical ties to Hecate. The Weasleys being one of them, Ron added, surprising Percy. Your family is connected to Hecate too? Ron nodded. According to those genealogy books, yeah. Most of the old families are, to some degree. But the Potters, Weasleys, and a few others have particularly strong connections. Which makes them primary targets, Harry concluded grimly. Kingsley's expression was grave. I'll arrange protective details for the most at-risk families. But our real priority must be finding Lestrange before he can launch another attack. We need to understand what ritual he performed at Delphi, Percy said. That's the key to how he's controlling and enhancing these monsters. And why he's targeting Hecate's descendants specifically, Harry added. Hermione's eyes lit up with sudden realization. The Department of Mysteries. The Unspeakables have an entire section devoted to ancient magical practices. If anyone would have information about Greek rituals adapted for wizarding use. I'll arrange access, Kingsley nodded. But discreetly. If word gets out about this demigod connection, it could cause panic throughout the wizarding community. As they discussed next steps, Percy felt a familiar tingling at the base of his skull, the demigod sense that warned of divine attention. Looking up, he saw the air several feet away shimmering with unnatural light, forming a misty rainbow that hadn't been there moments before. Guys, he said, interrupting the planning session. We have a call coming in. The wizards turned to stare as the rainbow solidified into an iris message, revealing the concerned face of Chiron in his wheelchair form. Percy, the centaur said, relief evident in his voice. Thank the gods. Our communications have been increasingly disrupted. Chiron, Percy stepped closer to the message. We've got a situation here. A dark wizard named Rodolphus Lestrange has found a way to control and enhance Greek monsters using some kind of ritual he performed at Delphi. I feared as much, Chiron's expression grew even more troubled. We've detected similar disruptions at other crossroads between the mortal and divine realms. Camp Half-Blood itself came under attack yesterday by creatures bearing the same magical signature you described. Is everyone okay? Percy asked urgently. We repelled them, though not without casualties. Fortunately, none fatal. Chiron's image flickered, the connection becoming unstable. Percy, listen carefully. This wizard is tampering with forces beyond his comprehension. If he continues to breach the boundaries between magical realms, He risks awakening entities far more dangerous than the monsters he's currently controlling. What kinds of entities? Harry asked, stepping into view of the iris message. Chiron's eyes widened slightly as he took in Harry. You must be the son of Hecate. The resemblance is remarkable. Harry stiffened. Resemblance to whom? To your divine mother, of course, Chiron said. That particular shade of green eyes is distinctive among her children, though rare. They reflect the color of her sacred flame. Percy glanced at Harry, suddenly recognizing why Harry's magical fire had burned green when he attacked the Hydra. It was the same color as his eyes, Hecate's color. Before Harry could respond, Chiron continued urgently as the message flickered more severely. The entities I speak of are ancient, older than the Olympians themselves. Hecate was once their guardian before aligning with Zeus. If the veils between realms are torn further, these primordial forces could find passage into your world. How do we stop Lestrange? Percy asked. You must seal the breach he's created, Chiron replied, his image becoming increasingly distorted. The ritual site at Delphi is key. But be warned, only one with the blood of Hecate can repair what has been damaged. The message dissolved into sparkling mist before they could ask anything further, leaving them staring at empty air. Well, Ron broke the silence, that was cheerful. Hermione turned to Harry, who seemed lost in thought. Harry? Are you all right? Harry's expression was unreadable as he looked up. He said I resemble Hecate. That my eyes are her eyes. He gave a short, humorless laugh. All my life, people have told me I have my mother's, Lily's, eyes. And now. Percy recognized the pain of conflicting identities all too well. It doesn't have to be either/or, he said quietly. Maybe Lily's eyes were green because of her connection to Hecate too. Maybe that's why you inherited them. Harry seemed to consider this possibility, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Maybe, he conceded. But more importantly, Chiron said only someone with Hecate's blood can seal this breach Lestrange has created. Which means you, Ron stated the obvious. Which means we need to go to Delphi, Harry concluded. To the source of all this. Kingsley, who had been silently observing the exchange with remarkable composure for someone who just witnessed his first iris message, stepped forward. A mission to Greece falls outside ministry jurisdiction. Officially, I cannot sanction such an operation. But unofficially? Hermione prompted. A ghost of a smile crossed Kingsley's face. Unofficially, I believe several Aura Department employees, including Mr. Potter, are due for some personal leave. And international port keys are arranged through my office. How soon can you have one ready? Harry asked. Tomorrow morning at the earliest, Kingsley replied. These things require some paperwork. Percy frowned. That might be too long. If Lestrange realizes we're onto him, he might accelerate whatever he's planning. There's another way, Ron suggested unexpectedly. Bill's working in Athens right now for Gringotts. If we could get to Bill, he could take us to Delphi, he's been researching ancient sites there for the goblins. Perfect, Harry nodded. But we still need to get to Athens first. I might have a solution for that, Percy said, an idea forming. But it's not exactly conventional transport, even by your standards. What did you have in mind? Hermione asked. Percy grinned. How do you all feel about Pegasi? 3 hours later, Percy stood on the flat roof of Grimmauld Place, peering at the cloudy London sky. Next to him, Harry, Ron, and Hermione waited with varying degrees of skepticism evident on their faces. Are you sure they can find us here? Hermione asked for the third time, clutching a small beaded bag that Percy had learned contained an impossible amount of supplies thanks to an undetectable extension charm. Positive, Percy assured her. Blackjack can track me anywhere. It's a Pegasus thing. And these horses, they can fly across the English Channel and all the way to Greece. Ron looked doubtful. That's over 2,000 kilometers. Pegasi aren't ordinary horses, Percy explained. They can travel between realms in ways mortal animals can't. Distance works differently for them. Plus, we're not going straight to Greece, we'll make a stop at Camp Half-Blood first. In America? Harry raised an eyebrow. That's even further. Percy shrugged. Like I said, distance works differently. Trust me, it'll be faster than your ministry paperwork. As if on cue, 3 dark shapes appeared in the clouds above, descending rapidly toward the rooftop. Blackjack, Percy's loyal black Pegasus, led 2 others, a palomino and a dappled gray. Yo, boss. Blackjack's familiar voice greeted Percy mentally as he landed with a graceful flutter of wings. You called for air transport. Brought pork pie and Guido like you asked. Thanks, Blackjack, Percy said aloud, patting the Pegasus's glossy neck. You made great time. Yeah, well, when you said, emergency in London, I figured it was the usual, Percy's in mortal danger, situation. Didn't want to find you half-eaten by monsters or something. Percy turned to the wizards, whose expressions ranged from awe to disbelief. Allow me to introduce Blackjack, Pork Pie, and Guido. Finest Pegasi this side of Olympus. They're beautiful, Hermione breathed, approaching slowly with her hand outstretched. Hey, the girl's got good taste, Blackjack commented, preening slightly. She can ride with Pork Pie. He's the smoothest flyer for beginners. Percy relayed this information, explaining to the confused wizards, I can communicate with horses and Pegasi. Son of Poseidon thing, he created horses from sea foam. Wicked, Ron murmured, cautiously approaching the dappled gray Pegasus. So we just, climb on. Pretty much, Percy confirmed. Hermione with Pork Pie, Ron with Guido, and Harry can ride with me on Blackjack. As they awkwardly mounted the Pegasi, Percy gave basic instructions on how to sit and hold on. Hermione, ever the quick study, positioned herself correctly on the first try, while Ron required some adjustment to prevent him from sliding off the back. They don't have saddles, Harry observed as he settled behind Percy on Blackjack's broad back. Pegasi consider them insulting, Percy explained. Just hold on to the mane, gently, and try to move with them, not against them. Tell the wizard behind you not to pull my mane out, Blackjack requested. Had a satyr do that once. Couldn't style it right for weeks. Percy relayed a more diplomatic version of this request, then addressed all 3 Pegasi. We need to get to Camp Half-Blood as quickly as possible. There's a situation. When isn't there? Blackjack snorted. Hold on tight, everyone. Pegasus Airlines is about to depart. With powerful thrusts of their wings, the 3 Pegasi launched skyward, quickly ascending above London's skyline. Percy heard Hermione's delighted gasp and Ron's startled yelp as they rose, the city shrinking beneath them. Harry, to his credit, remained silent, though his grip on Blackjack's mane tightened noticeably. This is incredible. Hermione called over the rush of wind as they leveled off above the clouds, the late morning sun bathing them in golden light. Percy grinned, familiar exhilaration coursing through him. No matter how many times he flew with Blackjack, the sensation of soaring above the world never lost its magic. Just wait until they really get moving. As if taking this as a challenge, Blackjack surged forward, the other Pegasi matching his pace. The wind became a roar, and the landscape below blurred impossibly fast. Percy felt Harry tense behind him. Are we supposed to be moving this quickly? Harry shouted over the wind. Like I said, Pegasi don't travel like normal animals, Percy called back. They can bend space when they need to. We'll be crossing the Atlantic in a fraction of the time it should take. Indeed, within what seemed like only minutes, the English countryside had given way to open ocean, the Atlantic stretching endlessly before them. The Pegasi maintained their impossible speed, clouds streaming past like highways in the sky. Hey boss, Blackjack communicated after they'd been flying for perhaps half an hour. Something weird up ahead. The air feels wrong. Percy tensed, scanning the horizon. At first, he saw nothing unusual, just clouds and sky and the distant sparkle of ocean far below. Then he noticed it, a faint discoloration in the air ahead, like heat rippling above pavement but spreading across a vast section of sky. "Blackjack, slow down," Percy ordered, signaling the other Pegasi to do the same. As they decelerated, the disturbance became more apparent, a shimmering curtain of purplish energy that reminded Percy unpleasantly of the aura surrounding Lestrange's enhanced monsters. "What is that?" Harry asked, leaning forward to see better. "Trouble," Percy replied grimly. "The boundaries between magical realms are thinning, just like Chiron warned. This looks like a weak spot, a tear in the veil." As they hovered at a safe distance, the distortion rippled more violently, and something began to emerge, a massive, serpentine shape that uncoiled from within the rift itself. "Oh, come on," Blackjack complained. "Can't we have one flight without some giant monster trying to eat us?" The creature fully emerged from the rift, a Dracena, but unlike any Percy had seen before. This one was at least 30 feet long, with multiple human torsos sprouting from its serpentine lower half. Each torso wielded different weapons, and all 6 heads turned toward them with predatory focus, eyes glowing with that now familiar purple light. "What in Merlin's name is that?" Ron shouted from Guido's back. "Dracena," Percy called back. "Snake woman, but this one's been seriously upgraded." The monster let out a multi-toned hiss and launched itself toward them with frightening speed despite being airborne, something normal Draceni definitely couldn't do. "Evasive maneuvers," Percy ordered the Pegasi, who scattered in different directions as the monster charged through the space they'd occupied moments before. "Got any bright ideas, boss?" Blackjack asked, banking sharply to avoid a spear thrown by one of the Dracena's arms. "Working on it," Percy muttered, uncapping Riptide awkwardly while maintaining his grip on Blackjack's mane. "Harry, can you cast spells while flying?" "I can try," Harry replied, drawing his wand. As the Dracena circled for another pass, Harry aimed carefully. Confringo. The blasting curse struck the monster's flank, causing it to writhe in pain, but the damage healed almost instantly, purple energy knitting the wound closed. "Magic alone won't work," Percy shouted to the others. "We need to combine attacks like before." Across the sky, Hermione had apparently reached the same conclusion. She directed Pork Pie toward Ron and Guido, bringing the 2 Pegasi close enough for her to shout instructions. Percy couldn't hear what she was saying, but moments later, both wizards began casting in tandem, their spells combining into a web of crackling energy that ensnared one of the Dracena's many arms. "Harry," Percy called over his shoulder, "I'm going to get in close. Be ready with that green fire of yours." Harry nodded, his expression determined. "Get me within range." Percy leaned forward, communicating mentally with Blackjack. "I need you to fly directly at that thing." "Are you crazy?" Blackjack protested. "That's a Pegasus-eating machine with 6 angry heads." "Trust me," Percy insisted. "Dive past its guard, then pull up sharp when I tell you." Blackjack snorted but complied, wheeling around and charging straight at the monster. The Dracena, momentarily distracted by Ron and Hermione's attack, noticed their approach too late to fully react. As they closed in, Percy raised Riptide, gauging the timing carefully. "Now," he shouted just as they came within striking distance. Blackjack executed a perfect barrel roll, flying inverted directly beneath the monster's guard. As they passed, Percy slashed upward with Riptide, opening a deep gash along the creature's underbelly. Blackjack completed the roll and shot upward on the other side as Harry twisted in his seat, wand aimed at the wound. "Incendio Divina!" Harry shouted, the spell flowing from his wand not as a conscious incantation but as if the words had been pulled from somewhere deep within his being. Green fire, brighter and more intense than what he'd conjured against the Hydra, erupted from Harry's wand, engulfing the Dracena's wound. The monster's screams echoed across the open sky as the divine flame spread throughout its body, consuming it from within. As the creature thrashed in its death throes, it made one final, desperate lunge toward them. Percy and Harry ducked as Blackjack swerved, but one of the monster's flailing arms caught the Pegasus's wing, sending them into a momentary spin. "Boss!" Blackjack whinnied in alarm, struggling to regain stability. "Can't hold altitude with a hit like that." Percy looked back to see a tear in Blackjack's left wing, not severe but enough to compromise his flying. Below them, the ocean was still thousands of feet away. A fall from this height would be fatal, even for a son of Poseidon. "Harry!" Percy shouted over the rushing wind. "Can you do anything for his wing?" Harry aimed his wand at the injured appendage. "Episky!" The simple healing spell shimmered over the tear, partially mending it but not completely. "Vulnera Senenter," Harry tried again, using a more powerful healing charm. This time, the wound sealed properly, though Blackjack still winced as he tested the wing. "It'll hold," the Pegasus confirmed, "but we should land soon for a proper rest." Above them, the Dracena finally succumbed to Harry's divine fire, dissolving into that now familiar mixture of golden dust and purple energy. As the remains scattered, the rift it had emerged from pulsed ominously before slowly closing in on itself, the unnatural distortion gradually fading. Hermione and Ron guided their Pegasi over to join them, both looking shaken but unharmed. "That was..." Ron began, seemingly at a loss for words. "Exactly what Chiron warned about," Percy finished grimly. "The boundaries are weakening. That thing came through a tear between worlds." "And did you hear what Harry said?" Hermione asked, eyes wide with academic excitement despite the danger they just faced. "Incendio Divina, divine fire. That's not a standard spell, Harry. It's not even in any advanced texts I've studied." Harry stared at his wand, looking slightly dazed. "I don't know where it came from. The words just appeared in my mind when I needed them." "Your divine heritage," Percy explained. "Demigod abilities often work that way, instinctual access to powers connected to your godly parent. You tapped into Hecate's divine fire directly, not just wizard magic." Harry absorbed this information silently, his expression thoughtful rather than resistant now. The practical demonstration of his connection to Hecate seemed to be convincing him in ways that theoretical discussions couldn't. "How much further to your camp?" he asked finally. Percy consulted mentally with Blackjack. "How are you holding up? Can we make it to Camp Half-Blood?" "Wings sore but functional," Blackjack replied. "We're already over American waters, another hour, tops." "Not much longer," Percy relayed to the others. "But Blackjack's wing needs attention when we land. We should all rest before continuing to Greece." They resumed their journey, though at a more conservative pace to accommodate Blackjack's injury. Percy noticed that Harry remained quiet, occasionally staring at his wand with a mixture of wonder and concern. The discovery of divine fire had clearly affected him deeply, making his connection to Hecate impossible to deny any longer. True to Blackjack's estimate, the familiar coastline of Long Island came into view about an hour later. As they approached, Percy felt the comforting tingle of the camp's magical borders that should, under normal circumstances, prevent entry to the wizards. But if Harry truly was a son of Hecate... "We're going to cross through a magical barrier," Percy warned the others. "It might feel strange, especially to you two," he added, indicating Ron and Hermione. "The camp is protected against mortals and most magical beings. Will it keep us out?" Hermione asked, concerned. "I'm not sure," Percy admitted. "Harry should be able to pass as a demigod, but you two might need to hold on to him as we cross." As they descended toward the strawberry fields that concealed Camp Half-Blood from mortal view, Percy directed Blackjack toward the big house rather than the stables, knowing Chiron would want to meet them immediately. The magical boundary shimmered below them, invisible to mortal eyes but distinct to Percy's trained senses. "Here we go," he called to the others. "Stay close together. They passed through the barrier in formation. Percy felt the familiar sensation of warmth as the camp's magic recognized and welcomed him. Behind him, Harry drew a sharp breath but seemed to pass through without difficulty. Ron and Hermione, each holding onto Harry's robes, experienced more resistance, the barrier stretching like elastic around them before reluctantly admitting them. It worked! Ron exclaimed, looking relieved. The barrier recognized Harry as a demigod, Percy confirmed. And you two as approved guests, I guess. They landed on the lawn before the big house, where Chiron, now in his full centaur form, waited with several senior counselors. Percy recognized Annabeth immediately, her blonde hair pulled back in its usual ponytail, her gray eyes calculating as she assessed the newcomers. As they dismounted, Percy directed a couple of Apollo campers to tend to Blackjack's wing before turning to make introductions. Chiron, he began, these are the wizards I told you about. Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, and Hermione Granger. Guys, this is Chiron, Activities Director of Camp Half-Blood and trainer of heroes for about 3,000 years. The wizards stared openly at Chiron's horse half, though to their credit, they recovered quickly. An honor to meet you, Hermione said, extending her hand. I've read so much about centaurs, though the ones we've encountered are somewhat different from you. The pleasure is mine, Miss Granger, Chiron replied with dignified courtesy. Magical beings often manifest differently across cultures. Your British centaurs have their own proud traditions. He turned his attention to Harry, studying him with ancient, knowing eyes. And Mr. Potter. I suspected your heritage when I glimpsed you through the iris message, but seeing you in person confirms it. You have Hecate's countenance, particularly her eyes. Harry met the centaur's gaze steadily. So I've been told recently. It's still an adjustment. Understandably so, Chiron nodded sympathetically. Discovering divine parentage is rarely easy, especially later in life. Percy felt Annabeth's presence before she spoke, a familiar warmth at his side. So you're actually wizards, she asked, gray eyes bright with intellectual curiosity. With wands and spells and everything? And you're demigods? Ron countered, equally curious. Children of actual gods. Perhaps we should continue this conversation inside, Chiron suggested, gesturing toward the big house. I suspect we have much to discuss and limited time in which to do it. As they followed the centaur up the porch steps, Annabeth fell into step beside Percy, threading her fingers through his. You look terrible, seaweed brain, she murmured. Monster trouble? The usual, Percy replied with a tired smile. Enhanced Greek monsters, dark wizards, interdimensional rifts. You know, a typical Tuesday. And Harry Potter is a son of Hecate, she pressed, voice low enough that only he could hear. That's significant. Especially with what's been happening. Percy raised an eyebrow. You know something I don't? Several things, actually, Annabeth smiled. But specifically about Hecate's recent activities. She's been unusually active on Olympus lately, arguing with Zeus about intervention in some matter he considers beyond their jurisdiction. Let me guess, wizard business. Seems likely. And now her son shows up at camp, accompanied by representatives of a hidden magical community we've barely interacted with for centuries. Not a coincidence. Percy sighed. It never is. Inside the big house rec room, they gathered around the ping-pong table that had served as the camp's war council through two divine conflicts. Maps and scrolls were already spread across its surface, including what appeared to be ancient diagrams of Mount Parnassus and the Oracle of Delphi. We've been monitoring the situation since Percy's initial contact, Chiron explained, indicating the materials. The disturbances are growing more frequent and more severe. Just yesterday, 3 rifts opened around camp's borders, allowing enhanced monsters through before we could seal them. Like the Dracena we encountered over the Atlantic, Harry noted. Precisely, Chiron nodded. These rifts are the result of the ritual performed at Delphi, a ritual we now believe was designed to thin the boundaries between magical realms. But why? Hermione asked, already examining the diagrams with scholarly intensity. What could this Lestrange possibly hope to gain by merging Greek and wizarding magic? Power, Annabeth answered simply. History is full of dark practitioners who sought to combine magical traditions for their own benefit. But in this case, there's more to it. She unrolled an ancient papyrus covered in Greek text. This is a fragment from the Alexandrian library, describing a ritual called the claiming of Hecate's fire. That's what Harry used against the monsters, Percy interjected. Divine fire, green flames that burn through magical protections. Annabeth nodded, continuing, according to this text, Hecate's divine fire is the purest form of magical energy, the source from which all other magical practices derive. If someone could control it directly, they could theoretically control all forms of magic, Hermione finished, eyes widening with understanding. Including wizarding magic. Which would explain why Lestrange is targeting locations connected to ancient wizarding bloodlines, Harry said. He's not just after me, he's trying to harvest or corrupt the divine connection to Hecate that runs through wizard bloodlines. To fuel his control over this fire, Ron concluded, surprisingly quick on the uptake. Chiron's expression was grave. And in doing so, he risks awakening forces that should remain dormant. Before Hecate aligned with the Olympians, she was guardian of the spaces between worlds, what the Greeks called the crossroads. These spaces contain entities older than the gods themselves. The primordials, Percy murmured, remembering his encounters with beings like Gaia and Tartarus. Entities so old and powerful they make the Olympians look like children. Indeed, Chiron confirmed. By systematically attacking sites sacred to Hecate and harvesting the divine essence from her descendants, Lestrange is unraveling the very protections she put in place millennia ago to keep these entities contained. A heavy silence fell over the room as the full implications sank in. This wasn't just about a dark wizard seeking power, it was about the potential unleashing of primordial forces that could threaten both the wizarding world and the realm of the gods. So how do we stop him? Harry asked, his voice cutting through the silence with quiet determination. We seal the breach at its source, Annabeth replied, pointing to a detailed diagram of the Delphic oracle complex. Here, in the underground chambers beneath the oracle. That's where the ritual was performed, and that's where the damage can be repaired. But Chiron said only someone with Hecate's blood can do that, Ron pointed out, looking at Harry. Harry met his friend's gaze steadily, then looked around at the assembled demigods and his fellow wizards. Percy recognized the expression on his face, the resigned acceptance of responsibility that came with being the hero prophecies pointed to. Then I'll do it, Harry said simply. Whatever it takes. You'll need preparation, Chiron cautioned. This isn't just about magical power, it requires specific knowledge of both your wizarding techniques and your divine heritage. You must learn to merge them consciously, not just instinctively as you did against the monsters. Can you teach me? Harry asked. Not I, Chiron shook his head. But there is one who can, if she chooses to answer our call. Percy understood immediately. You're going to summon Hecate herself. It is unusual, Chiron admitted. The gods rarely respond to direct summons. But these are unusual circumstances, and Hecate has already shown interest in these events through her arguments with Zeus. We'll need to prepare a proper offering, Annabeth added. Something meaningful to the goddess of magic and crossroads. I might have something, Harry said quietly, reaching into his robes to withdraw a small, triangular stone. This is the Resurrection Stone, one of the Deathly Hallows. It allows brief communication with the dead. If Hecate is goddess of crossroads between life and death. Hermione gasped. Harry. I thought you left that in the forest. I did, Harry replied. It found its way back to me a year later. Appeared on my pillow one morning with no explanation. I've kept it hidden ever since, but maybe this is why it returned. Percy watched as Harry placed the small stone on the table, its unassuming appearance belying its apparently significant power. Even without knowing its history, he could sense the ancient magic emanating from it, magic that felt different from both Olympian power and what he'd observed of wizard spells. A powerful offering indeed, Chiron murmured. We will prepare the ritual for tonight, at the sacred fire. Until then, rest and recover from your journey. We have guest quarters prepared. As the meeting dispersed, Annabeth led the wizards on a tour of camp while Percy remained behind with Chiron. You're worried, Percy observed once they were alone. The ancient centaur sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 3,000 years. The convergence of Greek and wizarding magic is not unprecedented, Percy, but it has always heralded significant change. The last time these worlds intersected so directly was during the fall of Rome. That doesn't sound encouraging, Percy frowned. History need not repeat itself, Chiron said carefully. Especially with appropriate intervention. But Harry Potter's role in all this concerns me. His connection to Hecate clearly goes beyond ordinary demigod parentage. This twice-blessed status Hermione mentioned suggests he carries a concentration of divine power that few mortals could safely wield. You think it might be too much for him? I think he has already shouldered burdens beyond what any young person should bear, Chiron replied. From what I gather, his wizarding community placed enormous expectations upon him from childhood. Now he discovers he is also a child of prophecy in our world. Percy knew exactly what that felt like. The weight of two great prophecies had nearly crushed him. He seemed strong enough to handle it, he said, thinking of Harry's calm resolve in the face of monsters and identity revelations alike. Strong, yes, Chiron agreed. But at what cost to himself? Watch him carefully, Percy. When gods and fate place too many demands on a mortal vessel, even the strongest can break. With that sobering warning, Chiron departed to prepare for the evening's ritual, leaving Percy to ponder the parallels between his own journey and Harry's. Both had faced monsters and prophecies, both had lost loved ones to conflicts that began before their births, both had been expected to save their respective worlds. Yet there was something about Harry that suggested an even deeper well of endurance, a quiet resilience forged through trials Percy could only guess at. If anyone could bear the weight of dual magical legacies, Percy suspected it would be the unassuming wizard with Hecate's eyes. As the afternoon sun began its descent toward the horizon, Percy made his way toward the guest quarters to check on their visitors. Whatever came next, one thing was certain: the meeting between Harry Potter and the goddess he never knew was his mother promised to be eventful, even by demigod standards. Dusk settled over Camp Half-Blood, transforming the familiar landscape into something more mysterious. Shadows lengthened between cabins, and the sacred hearth at the center of the common area blazed higher than usual, its flames occasionally shifting to an emerald green that reminded Percy of Harry's eyes and the divine fire he had conjured. The entire camp had gathered for the ritual, curiosity about their wizard visitors spreading like wildfire throughout the day. Percy stood with Annabeth and the wizards near the hearth, where Chiron had prepared a small altar decorated with symbols of Hecate, torches, keys, and a black dog carved from obsidian. Harry had been unnaturally quiet since their arrival, observing camp activities with keen interest but volunteering little. Now, as he stood before the altar clutching the resurrection stone, his expression was a mixture of apprehension and determination. "Are you ready?" Chiron asked him gently. Harry nodded, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames. "What do I need to do?" "Place your offering on the altar," Chiron instructed. "Then speak her name 3 times while focusing on your connection to her, the part of you that accessed divine fire." Harry carefully placed the small stone on the altar, where it seemed to absorb the firelight rather than reflect it. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and spoke with clear intention. "Hecate." The flames flickered, their color deepening toward emerald. "Hecate." The fire grew taller, consuming no fuel yet burning brighter, casting long shadows across the assembled campers. "Hecate." The flames exploded upward in a column of pure green fire before collapsing inward, condensing into the form of a woman. She was tall and regal, with dark hair that seemed to contain constellations when it moved. Her eyes, the same vibrant green as Harry's, surveyed the gathering with ancient intelligence. She wore flowing robes that shifted between black, green, and purple, and 3 spectral hounds sat at her feet, their eyes glowing like embers. "I have been called," she stated, her voice resonating with power. "And I have chosen to answer." Percy had met gods before, his own father, Athena, Apollo, and others, but Hecate's presence felt different. Where most gods projected a singular type of power, hers seemed multi-layered, as if she existed in several dimensions simultaneously. Chiron bowed deeply. "Lady Hecate, we thank you for honoring us with your presence." The goddess acknowledged him with a slight nod before turning her attention to Harry, who stood transfixed, staring at the divine being who was apparently his mother. For a long moment, neither spoke, simply studying one another with identical green eyes. "Harry Potter," Hecate finally said, his name rolling off her tongue with a strange mixture of familiarity and formality. "At last, we meet face to face." Harry straightened his shoulders. "Why now?" he asked simply, the question containing years of unspoken pain. "Why reveal yourself after everything I've been through?" A ripple of tension spread through the assembled campers at his direct challenge to a goddess, but Hecate did not appear offended. Instead, her expression softened into something almost resembling remorse. "The ancient laws bind even the gods, especially in matters concerning our children," she replied. "But beyond those constraints, I have my reasons, which I will share with you alone." She gestured, and a shimmering veil of green light surrounded them, creating a pocket of privacy within the public gathering. Though Percy could still see their silhouettes through the translucent barrier, their words became inaudible to everyone except the goddess and her son. Within their private sanctuary, Harry faced the goddess who had never before acknowledged him. "You let me believe I was just a wizard," he said, unable to keep the hurt from his voice. "You watched while Voldemort hunted me, while people died protecting me. I intervened in ways you cannot comprehend," Hecate interrupted, her voice both gentle and firm. "Why do you think your mother's protection was so powerful? Why do you think you survived the killing curse not once, but twice? Lily Potter's sacrifice was magnificent, yes, but it was my power flowing through her veins that allowed it to manifest as it did." Harry's breath caught. "You're saying my mother, Lily, was also your descendant?" "One of my most gifted in many generations," Hecate confirmed. "Though she herself never knew it. The wizarding world has forgotten its true origins, reimagining its history through a more comfortable lens. Magic as an inherited trait, passed through bloodlines rather than bestowed by divine blessing. But why hide this from everyone? From me?" Hecate waved her hand, and images formed in the air between them, scenes from ancient history showing robed figures performing rituals at crossroads and sacred groves. "Long ago, wizards knew me as their patron goddess. They honored me at every turning of the moon and sought my blessing for their spells. But as centuries passed and the gods moved with the heart of Western civilization, most wizards chose to remain in their ancestral lands. The images shifted, showing wizards gradually turning away from ancient altars, developing their own traditions independent of divine influence. The separation was gradual but deliberate on both sides. Zeus decreed that gods should limit their direct intervention in mortal affairs, while wizard governments increasingly isolated their communities from both the divine realm and the mortal world. "So you abandoned them," Harry concluded. "Abandoned us." "I never abandoned my children," Hecate replied with sudden sharpness. "I merely respected their choice to forge their own path. Magic flows through wizard bloodlines because of my initial blessing, but it has evolved into something unique, something that is both my gift and entirely its own." She stepped closer to Harry, her expression softening again. "As for you specifically, you are something unprecedented, Harry Potter. Born of my divine essence yet raised within the wizarding tradition. The prophecy that marked you as Voldemort's equal referred to power he knew not, power that was more than love, more than sacrifice. It was the latent divine spark within you, awaiting awakening. Why awaken it now? Why not when I was fighting Voldemort? Because the threat you face now is different," Hecate said gravely. Rodolphus Lestrange has discovered what Voldemort never fully understood, the true source of wizarding magic and its connection to me. He seeks to harness this knowledge not merely to control wizards, but to access the primordial power I guard at the crossroads between worlds. Harry absorbed this information, his expression gradually shifting from accusation to troubled understanding. These enhanced monsters, the rifts between worlds, they're just the beginning, aren't they? Yes, Hecate confirmed. Lestrange's ritual at Delphi opened a pathway that should remain closed. If not sealed, it will continue to widen until entities far more dangerous than monsters can pass through. And only I can seal it because of my connection to you, Harry concluded. Your unique heritage makes you capable of wielding both forms of magic simultaneously, wizarding and divine. No one else living possesses this ability. Hecate's voice softened further. I did not reveal myself earlier because I hoped you might live the life you chose, free from divine burdens. But fate, it seems, had other plans. Harry was silent for a long moment, processing everything he had learned. When he spoke again, his voice was steady. I need to know how to seal this breach. And I need to understand my connection to you better if I'm going to use it effectively. Hecate smiled for the first time, a smile that transformed her austere features into something warmer, something that reminded Harry painfully of photographs he had seen of Lily Potter. Your mother would be proud of your courage, she said softly. Both your mothers. She waved her hand, dissolving the privacy barrier and addressing the entire gathering once more. I will instruct Harry Potter in what he must know, she announced. The breach at Delphi must be sealed before the next new moon, when the veil between worlds grows thinnest. Chiron stepped forward. Lady Hecate, we have prepared quarters for you. That will not be necessary, the goddess interrupted. I cannot remain in one place long while maintaining the remaining barriers between realms. I will return at dawn to begin Harry's instruction. She turned to Harry again. Rest tonight. Tomorrow will demand much of you. Before anyone could respond, Hecate's form dissolved into green fire that spiraled upward before vanishing completely, leaving only the normal campfire behind. The resurrection stone remained on the altar, but it had changed. What was once a simple black stone now gleamed with a faint emerald sheen. In the stunned silence that followed the goddess's departure, all eyes turned to Harry, who stood motionless before the altar. Percy moved first, approaching his fellow hero with understanding born of similar experiences. Gods, he said with a half-smile, not big on lengthy goodbyes, are they? Harry let out a surprised laugh that seemed to break the tension. Apparently not. Though as far as divine parent meetings go, that was, actually better than I expected. Consider yourself lucky, Percy replied. My first meeting with Poseidon was in front of the entire Olympian Council while they were debating whether to kill me. The gathering gradually dispersed, campers returning to their cabins with excited whispers about the appearance of Hecate and speculation about what would happen next. Chiron directed the wizards to the big house guest quarters, where they would spend the night before Harry's training began at dawn. As they walked toward the blue farmhouse, Hermione fell into step beside Harry. Are you all right? She asked softly. That was intense. Harry nodded slowly. I think I am, actually. It's strange, but learning about this connection to Hecate, it answers questions I've had my entire life. Why I survived when no one else did. Why magic always felt so natural to me, even without formal training. It doesn't change who you are, Ron added from Harry's other side. Wizard, demigod, whatever, you're still the same bloke who couldn't dance at the Yule Ball to save his life. Harry grinned at his friend's deliberate levity. Thanks for the reminder. Percy and Annabeth walked a few paces behind, giving the trio space to process together. They remind me of us, Annabeth murmured to Percy. The three of them together, that same bond forged through shared dangers. Yeah, Percy agreed. Though I'm pretty sure you never had Ron's table manners. Annabeth nudged him playfully before growing serious again. Hecate's warning about the new moon gives us less than 3 days to reach Delphi and prepare for whatever ritual Harry needs to perform. We'll make it, Percy said with more confidence than he felt. We've faced worse deadlines. True, Annabeth conceded. But usually not while trying to prevent primordial horrors from entering our world through magical tears in reality. Just another Tuesday, like I said. They reached the big house, where Chiron was waiting on the porch with a concerned expression. Harry, he called, a moment, if you would. Harry nodded to his friends and joined the centaur while the others continued inside. I wish to ensure you understand what lies ahead, Chiron said once they were alone. Hecate's instruction will not be easy. Divine magic is fundamentally different from wizarding techniques, less structured, more intuitive, and potentially dangerous to wield without proper preparation. I understand, Harry replied. But I need to do this. If Lestrange succeeds, the consequences would be catastrophic for both our worlds, Chiron finished. I know. Just be cautious in how quickly you attempt to access these new powers. Divine energy flowing through mortal veins can be overwhelming. Harry smiled wryly. I'm familiar with overwhelming power. Had a piece of Voldemort's soul in me for 17 years, remember? Chiron's ancient eyes reflected compassion born of millennia watching heroes struggle with destinies not of their choosing. Perhaps that experience prepared you for this moment. Rest now, Harry Potter. Dawn comes quickly, and with it, your first steps into a much larger world of magic. As Harry entered the big house to join his friends, Percy couldn't help but admire the quiet dignity with which the young wizard faced each new revelation. Whatever training Hecate had planned, Percy suspected Harry Potter would meet it with the same resilience he had shown against monsters and identity revelations alike. The real question was whether that resilience would be enough against whatever awaited them at Delphi. Chapter 3, Sons of Magic. Dawn broke over Camp Half-Blood, painting the sky in stripes of gold and amber. Harry Potter stood alone at the edge of the canoe lake, watching the light dance across the rippling surface. He'd risen before the others, sleep eluding him after yesterday's revelations. The weight of the resurrection stone pressed against his chest where he'd hung it on a simple cord, transformed by Hecate's presence, now glowing faintly with emerald energy. The past few days felt like a lifetime. From Percy Jackson's unexpected appearance at the leaky cauldron to the discovery of his divine heritage to meeting Hecate herself, the goddess who was, apparently, his mother. It should have overwhelmed him, yet Harry found himself strangely calm. After 7 years of fighting Voldemort, after dying and returning, perhaps nothing could truly shock him anymore. You're up early. Harry turned to find Percy approaching, his orange Camp Half-Blood t-shirt bright against the morning mist. The son of Poseidon moved with easy confidence, clearly at home here among the cabins and training fields. Couldn't sleep, Harry admitted. Figured I'd get some air before Hecate arrives. Percy nodded in understanding. First day of god training. Been there. He skipped a stone across the lake's surface, the water seeming to carry it farther than physics should allow. Any idea what to expect? None, Harry replied. But I've had some questionable teachers before. Doubt Hecate can be worse than Snape. Percy raised an eyebrow. Snape? Potions professor. Hated my father, or who I thought was my father, and made sure I knew it every lesson for 6 years. Harry smiled wryly. Though in the end, he turned out to be one of the bravest men I've ever known. Just also the most unpleasant. Gods have their own teaching styles, Percy warned. My dad's method was basically, throw you in the ocean and see if you drown. Spoiler, I didn't. Harry laughed despite himself. The easy camaraderie he felt with Percy surprised him. This American demigod he'd known for only days already felt like someone he could trust. Perhaps shared destinies created bonds that transcended normal acquaintance. How do you balance it? Harry asked suddenly. Being a normal person with all of this. He gestured vaguely at the magical camp around them. Percy considered the question seriously. I don't think I do balance it, not perfectly. But I've got people who understand, Annabeth, Grover, my mom. They anchor me. He glanced sideways at Harry. You've got that too. Ron and Hermione, they're still with you, even with all this demigod business. They've stuck with me through worse, Harry agreed quietly. The conversation halted as the air between them shimmered, coalescing into Hecate's regal form. Unlike the previous night's dramatic entrance through fire, this manifestation was subtler, as if the goddess had simply stepped through an invisible doorway in reality itself. Harry Potter, she greeted, her emerald eyes, so like his own, studying him intently. You are prepared to begin? Harry straightened, meeting her gaze. I am. Percy made to leave, but Hecate stopped him with a raised hand. Stay, son of Poseidon. Your presence may be useful today. Percy looked surprised but nodded. Whatever you need, Lady Hecate. The goddess turned her attention back to Harry. What I must teach you cannot be learned through books or wand movements. Divine magic flows from a different source than wizarding spells, a more primal, intuitive wellspring. She gestured, and 3 spectral hounds appeared at her feet, glowing with ghostly light. My companions will create a boundary to ensure our practice remains contained. The hounds moved outward, circling a large area of the lakeshore before sitting at equidistant points, their eyes glowing like embers in the morning light. First, Hecate continued, I must help you understand the fundamental difference between wizard magic and divine power. She extended her hand, palm up, where a small flame danced, not the green fire Harry had conjured against the monsters, but ordinary orange fire. Wizard magic is structured, disciplined, channeled through implements and incantations. It bends reality through established patterns. The flame transformed, shifting to vibrant green. Divine magic creates reality. It doesn't request fire to appear, it defines what fire is. Harry tried to process this distinction. So wizard spells work within the rules of reality, while divine magic writes those rules. A simplification, but essentially correct, Hecate nodded, pleased with his understanding. Your wand magic follows pathways I established millennia ago when I blessed the first wizards. But as my trueborn son, you can access the source directly. That's what happened when I cast that fire spell against the Hydra and the Dracena, Harry realized. I wasn't just casting a spell, I was creating fire directly. Precisely. Now, Hecate's expression grew more serious, place your wand on the ground beside you. Harry hesitated only briefly before setting his holly and phoenix feather wand on a nearby rock. Even after years of wielding it, separating from his wand still felt like losing a limb. Good, Hecate approved. Now, close your eyes and focus on your magical core, the place within you from which your power flows when casting spells. Harry obeyed, his eyes falling closed as he turned his attention inward. Years of occlumency practice, however unsuccessful they had been against Snape and Voldemort, had at least taught him to visualize his inner magical landscape. He found the familiar warm pulse at his center that he'd always associated with his magic. I can feel it, he murmured. Look deeper, Hecate instructed, her voice taking on a melodic quality. Beneath the organized pathways of your wizard training lies something older, something that was within you before you ever held a wand. Harry concentrated harder, pushing past the familiar contours of his magical awareness. For several minutes, nothing changed, and frustration began to build within him. Then, just as he was about to give up, he sensed it, a deeper current beneath his normal magic, ancient and powerful, flowing like an underground river beneath the surface of his consciousness. There's something more, he whispered, almost afraid to break his concentration. It feels vast. Older. Wild. That is your divine heritage, Hecate confirmed. The raw power that flows through my bloodline into yours. Now, reach for it, not with your hands or with wizard techniques, but with pure intention. Harry extended his awareness toward the deeper current, trying to connect with it directly. The moment he made contact, energy surged through him like a lightning strike. His eyes flew open involuntarily, and he gasped as green light emanated from his skin, outlining his body in a faint emerald aura. "Whoa," Percy murmured from the sidelines. "Too much," Hecate cautioned. "You reach too forcefully. Divine magic requires finesse, not strength. Try again, with gentler intention." Harry took a deep breath, closing his eyes once more and approaching the power more carefully this time. Instead of grasping for it, he allowed his awareness to sink gradually into the current, feeling it flow around and through him. The sensation was extraordinary, like stepping into an ocean of pure potential, where reality itself seemed malleable. "Better," Hecate's voice came as if from a great distance. "Now, with that connection maintained, open your eyes and extend your hand." Harry did as instructed, his eyes opening to find the world subtly altered. Colors seemed more vibrant, and faint lines of energy connected everything around him, a web of power he'd never noticed before. He raised his hand, palm up, maintaining his connection to the divine current within. "Visualize flame," Hecate directed. "Not as something you create with a spell, but as an expression of your will made manifest." Harry focused on his palm, imagining fire not as an effect to be produced but as an extension of the energy flowing through him. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, emerald flames blossomed from his bare palm, not burning him, but dancing across his skin like a living thing. "I'm doing it," he breathed, amazed. "Without a wand." "Without a wand," Hecate confirmed, "without an incantation, without the structured pathways of wizard magic. This is direct creation, the oldest form of magic." The flames grew, responding to Harry's wonder and excitement. They climbed higher, forming shapes that seemed almost sentient, serpents and stags and phoenixes of green fire writhing in the air above his palm. "Control it," Hecate warned sharply. "Divine fire responds to emotion as much as intention. Do not let it rule you." Harry nodded, forcing himself to calm, to direct the fire with precision rather than emotion. The flames receded gradually, condensing into a perfect sphere that hovered inches above his palm. "Excellent," Hecate's approval was evident. "Now, extinguish it with the same deliberate control." Harry closed his fingers slowly, and the emerald sphere diminished until it vanished completely. The moment it disappeared, exhaustion hit him like a physical blow. He staggered, knees buckling. Percy darted forward to catch him before he could fall. "Easy," the son of Poseidon steadied him. "First time using god powers takes it out of you." "Indeed," Hecate nodded. "Divine magic draws directly from your life force until you develop proper channels for it. With practice, the fatigue will diminish." Harry straightened, determined not to show weakness. "What's next?" Hecate's lips quirked in what might have been approval at his persistence. "Next, we integrate your two magical natures. Retrieve your wand." Harry picked up his wand, feeling the familiar warm response as his fingers closed around the polished holly. "Your wand is an interface," Hecate explained, "a tool designed to structure and focus magical energy along established patterns. For ordinary wizards, it is essential. For you, it can be both help and hindrance." "How so?" Harry asked. "It limits you to wizarding pathways when used conventionally. But when combined with conscious access to your divine heritage." Hecate gestured for him to raise his wand. "Cast a simple spell, Lumos, perhaps, while maintaining awareness of your divine current." Harry raised his wand, focusing simultaneously on the familiar spell and the deeper well of power he'd discovered. "Lumos," he said clearly. Instead of the standard small light at the wand's tip, his entire wand glowed with brilliant emerald radiance, casting shadows across the lakeshore. The light pulsed with his heartbeat, alive in a way wizard spells never were. "The difference is control," Hecate explained. "Wizard magic channels power along predefined paths. Divine magic creates new paths. By combining them, you gain both precision and creative potential." For the next several hours, Hecate guided Harry through exercises that merged his wizarding techniques with his newfound divine abilities. Simple spells became extraordinary, shield charms that rippled with divine energy, capable of repelling forces far beyond normal magical attacks. Transfigurations that altered not just form but essence. Charms that affected reality at a deeper level than standard wizard effects. Percy occasionally participated, providing a target for Harry's non-destructive spells or demonstrating his own demigod abilities for comparison. The son of Poseidon's water control offered an insightful parallel, another form of inherited divine power, channeled through mortal flesh. By midday, Harry was drenched in sweat, his body trembling with exhaustion, but his eyes burned with determination and newfound confidence. He could feel the changes within himself, not just new power, but a deeper understanding of magic itself. Connections and patterns he'd never noticed before in his spellwork now seemed obvious. "You learn quickly," Hecate observed as they concluded a particularly complex exercise involving simultaneous manipulation of the 4 classical elements. "Your wizard training has provided a stronger foundation than I anticipated." "Defense against the dark arts was always my best subject," Harry replied with a hint of pride. "That, and finding trouble. A common trait among demigods," Hecate noted dryly, casting a meaningful glance at Percy, who grinned unrepentantly. "Speaking of trouble," Percy interjected, "the others are gathering for lunch at the pavilion. We should probably join them to discuss our next steps." Hecate nodded. "A brief respite is warranted. This afternoon, we will focus on the specific ritual you must perform at Delphi." She turned to Harry. "You have done well today, my son." Few could assimilate these lessons so rapidly. The praise, delivered in her formal manner, nonetheless sent a warm current through Harry. All his life, he'd craved parental approval, the words of encouragement his parents might have spoken had they lived. Hearing them from Hecate, even in her reserved, goddess-like way, touched something deep within him. "Thank you," he said simply. "I'll be ready for whatever comes next." Hecate's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "I believe you will be." With that, she dissolved into mist, vanishing as suddenly as she had appeared. Percy clapped Harry on the shoulder. "Congratulations on surviving Divine Training Day 1. Come on, food always helps after draining your magic batteries." As they walked toward the dining pavilion, Harry flexed his fingers, feeling the new awareness of power flowing beneath his skin. "It's strange," he admitted. "All these years, I thought I knew what magic was. Now I realize I was only seeing a fraction of it." "Welcome to the demigod life," Percy replied with a sympathetic smile. "Just when you think you've got the world figured out, the world gets bigger." "Does it ever get easier?" Harry asked, genuinely curious. Percy considered this as they approached the pavilion, where their friends waited. "Not easier," he said finally. "But clearer. You start to see how everything connects, gods, monsters, destiny, choice. It all forms a pattern, even when it seems random." Harry nodded thoughtfully. "I think I'm beginning to see it too." The dining pavilion buzzed with excited conversation as campers speculated about their visitors and the morning's training session, which had been visible from several cabins. Harry found himself the object of curious stares as he and Percy joined Ron, Hermione, and Annabeth at a specially arranged table near the central fire. "Harry!" Hermione exclaimed, rising to meet them. "How was it?" "We could see green light from the big house, but Chiron said we shouldn't interrupt." "Intense," Harry admitted, sliding onto the bench beside her. "But incredible. I'm learning to access magic directly, without the structure of wizard spells." "That's theoretically impossible," Hermione began automatically, then caught herself. "Or at least, according to everything we've been taught about magical theory." "Which turns out to be incomplete," Harry said, accepting a plate heaped with food from a passing satyr. The concept of nature spirits serving meals had surprised him initially, but after everything else, he was adapting quickly to Camp Half-Blood's peculiarities. "Wizard magic is just one expression of a deeper power, Hecate's power." "So you can do magic without your wand now?" Ron asked, looking both impressed and slightly concerned. "Some forms, yes. But it's more effective to combine approaches. Harry demonstrated by pointing his wand at his goblet while focusing on his divine current. Aguamenti, he murmured. The goblet filled not with ordinary water but with a shimmering liquid that seemed to glow from within. Percy leaned forward, his expression curious. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the goblet. Harry nodded, and Percy extended his hand over the liquid. In response, it rose in a perfect spiral before settling back into the cup. "Definitely not regular water," Percy confirmed. "It's infused with divine energy, like the streams on Olympus." "That's extraordinary," Annabeth commented, her grey eyes analytical. "You're essentially transcending the boundaries between wizarding and Greek magical systems." "Which is exactly what we'll need to do at Delphi," Percy added, his expression growing more serious. "Speaking of which, Chiron and I worked out our travel arrangements while you were training." Annabeth unrolled a map on the table, revealing the Mediterranean with Greece prominently featured. "We'll take Pegasi as far as Camp Jupiter in California, our Roman counterpart camp. From there, we can use their direct passage to Greece through the Mediterranean Sea. The Romans maintained a more robust infrastructure throughout their territories than the Greeks did," she explained to the wizards. "Including magical pathways that still function today. We leave at dusk," Percy continued. "Hecate said she'll complete Harry's training this afternoon, focusing specifically on the sealing ritual he'll need to perform." "What about Lestrange?" Harry asked. "We know he'll be at Delphi, probably expecting us." "That's where these come in," Hermione said, reaching into her beaded bag to withdraw several small vials containing swirling silver-blue liquid. "Memories from the Ministry archives about Lestrange's activities before he disappeared. Kingsley sent them via special owl this morning." "Memories?" Percy questioned, looking confused. "Wizards can extract and view memories," Harry explained. "These are probably from witnesses or intelligence reports about Lestrange's movements after the Battle of Hogwarts." "Precisely," Hermione confirmed. "I've brought a portable pensieve, a device for viewing them. I thought it might help us understand what we're up against." "Smart thinking," Annabeth approved. "Intelligence gathering is crucial before any mission." "We should view them after lunch," Harry decided. "The more we know about Lestrange's plans, the better prepared we'll be." As they finished their meal, Chiron approached their table, his centaur form drawing curious glances from the wizards despite their previous introduction. "Harry," he greeted, "Hecate asked me to inform you that she will continue your instruction at the amphitheater at 2 o'clock. The space is better suited for the more expansive aspects of what she must teach you." He turned to Percy. "And Mr. D wishes to speak with you about the quest authorization." Percy groaned. "Great. Just what I needed, a chat with the god of madness before a dangerous mission." "Mr. D?" Ron questioned. "Dionysus," Annabeth explained. "God of wine, madness, and theater. He's the camp director, serving a punishment from Zeus for chasing an off-limits nymph." Ron's eyes widened. "Your camp is run by the god of madness? And I thought Hogwarts had management issues. At least your headmasters didn't regularly threaten to turn students into dolphins," Percy muttered, rising from the table. "I'll go see what he wants. Meet you all at the big house in an hour for those memories." With agreements all around, the group dispersed. Harry found himself walking toward the amphitheater early, drawn to the stone structure that reminded him vaguely of parts of Hogwarts. The familiar pang of homesickness surprised him. Even with all its dangers and painful memories, Hogwarts had been his first true home. "It doesn't replace what you had before," came a voice from behind him. Harry turned to find Annabeth, her blonde hair catching the afternoon sunlight. She approached, gesturing to the camp around them. "Percy went through the same thing when he first came here," she continued. "Wondering if this new world meant giving up his old one." "Is that what I'm doing? Giving up being a wizard to be a demigod?" Harry asked, the question that had been nagging at him finally given voice. Annabeth shook her head. "You're not giving up either. You're integrating them." She sat on one of the stone benches, inviting Harry to join her. I've spent years studying how different pantheons and magical systems interact across cultures. They're not mutually exclusive, they're different perspectives on the same underlying reality. Like looking at a building from different angles, Harry suggested, taking the seat beside her. Exactly, Annabeth smiled, clearly pleased with his understanding. Being Hecate's son doesn't invalidate your wizard identity, it contextualizes it within a larger framework. Harry considered this, finding comfort in her logical approach. You sound like Hermione, always the rational voice. I'll take that as a compliment, Annabeth replied. Though I suspect she and I would have some fascinating debates about magical theory. She paused, her expression growing more serious. Percy told me about what you've been through, not everything, I'm sure, but enough to recognize a fellow survivor. Harry met her steady grey gaze, seeing in it the same hard-won wisdom he sometimes glimpsed in his own reflection. We all have our battles. Yes, she agreed quietly. But some of us fight wars before we've had childhoods. It marks you. Changes how you see the world. The simple acknowledgement of their shared experience, the understanding that came only from walking similar paths, created an immediate bond between them. Harry found himself nodding, words unnecessary. For what it's worth, Annabeth continued after a moment, I think you're handling this whole divine heritage revelation remarkably well. Percy nearly blew up a bathroom when he found out about Poseidon. That startled a laugh from Harry. To be fair, I've had practice with life-changing revelations. First finding out I was a wizard, then discovering I had a piece of Voldemort's soul inside me. Finding out Hecate is my mother is almost predictable at this point. Annabeth's smile was warm with understanding. Just remember, you're still writing your own story, Harry Potter. Gods and prophecies and destinies aside, the choices that matter most are still yours to make. Before Harry could respond, a shimmer in the air announced Hecate's arrival. The goddess materialized in the center of the amphitheater, today accompanied by all three of her spectral hounds. I see you came early, she observed. Eagerness is commendable. Just trying to be prepared, Harry replied, rising from the bench. Annabeth stood as well. I'll leave you to your training, she said, then added to Hecate, Lady Hecate, with your permission, we're planning to review intelligence on Lestrange's activities before departing for Delphi this evening. A wise precaution, Hecate approved. His madness is dangerous precisely because it contains fragments of genius. Do not underestimate him. With a respectful nod to the goddess, Annabeth departed, leaving Harry alone with his divine mother and her supernatural companions. This afternoon, Hecate began without preamble, I will teach you the ritual to seal the breach at Delphi. It is complex magic, drawing on both your wizard training and your divine heritage. Pay careful attention, for I cannot accompany you to Delphi itself. You can't? Harry asked, surprised. Why not? The breach affects the barriers I maintain between worlds, Hecate explained. My presence near it would only exacerbate the instability. This task must be accomplished by mortal hands, specifically, by one who bridges the wizarding and divine realms. Harry nodded in understanding. Me. Yes. Hecate gestured, and the air between them filled with glowing symbols, ancient Greek letters intertwined with what Harry recognized as runic scripts used in advanced wizard rituals. The sealing requires three elements, the spoken incantation, the physical positioning of power anchors, and the directed flow of both wizard and divine magic simultaneously. For the next 2 hours, Harry practiced the complex ritual under Hecate's exacting guidance. The incantation was in ancient Greek, its syllables difficult for his English-trained tongue, but he persevered until Hecate deemed his pronunciation acceptable. The positioning of the power anchors, which would be represented by physical objects at Delphi, required precise spatial relationships that Harry memorized carefully. The most challenging aspect, however, was maintaining the delicate balance between wizard and divine magic throughout the ritual's duration. Too much emphasis on either would cause the entire working to collapse. Think of it as conducting two orchestras simultaneously, Hecate instructed as Harry struggled with the balance. Each playing different music that must nonetheless harmonize. By late afternoon, sweat drenched Harry's clothes despite the cool air, and his hands trembled with magical exhaustion. Yet each attempt brought improvement, his control growing more precise, the separate magical streams flowing more harmoniously under his direction. Enough, Hecate declared finally. You have grasped the essentials. Further practice without rest will only diminish your capabilities. Harry lowered his wand, breathing heavily. Will it be enough to seal the breach? Hecate studied him, her ageless eyes unreadable. That depends not only on your technical execution but on your conviction. Magic, all magic, responds to the practitioner's will and belief. If you approach the ritual with doubt, it will fail. I understand, Harry said, though uncertainty gnawed at him. The ritual was far more complex than any magic he'd attempted before, combining systems he was still learning to integrate. As if sensing his inner conflict, Hecate stepped closer, her expression softening slightly. Harry Potter, you have faced trials that would break most mortals. You walked willingly to your death to save others. You stood against darkness when all seemed lost. Her voice took on an unusual gentleness. This challenge is no different in essence, only in form. The unexpected encouragement from the normally reserved goddess touched something deep within Harry. Thank you, he said simply. Hecate nodded once, then reached out to touch the resurrection stone that still hung from the cord around Harry's neck. This artifact has been transformed by our interaction. It will serve as your primary focus during the ritual, a perfect bridge between death and life, between old magic and new. The stone pulsed warmly against Harry's chest in response to her touch. One last gift before I depart, Hecate continued. She waved her hand, and Harry's wand glowed briefly with emerald light. I have attuned your wand more perfectly to your dual nature. It will now channel both forms of magic with equal facility. Harry felt the difference immediately, his wand humming with new resonance in his hand, as if awakened to fuller potential. Remember, Hecate said, her form already beginning to shimmer with imminent departure, at Delphi, you must be both wizard and demigod, both mortal and divine. Embrace all aspects of your heritage, deny none, and the ritual will succeed. With those final words, she dissolved into mist, leaving Harry alone in the amphitheater with the lengthening shadows of approaching evening. He stood there for several moments, processing everything he had learned, before making his way toward the big house where the others would be waiting to view the memories Hermione had brought. Each step felt weighted with responsibility, yet Harry realized that the burden was familiar, almost comforting in its familiarity. Once again, he stood at the nexus of a conflict that threatened worlds, called to act because of who and what he was. But this time, he wasn't facing it alone or unprepared. This time, he understood more fully what he was, not just the boy who lived or the chosen one, but a bridge between worlds, carrying the legacy of both his mothers in his blood and magic. The big house recreation room had been transformed into an improvised strategy center, with maps covering the ping-pong table and magical artifacts scattered across various surfaces. Percy, Annabeth, Ron, and Hermione were already there when Harry arrived, gathered around a shallow stone basin etched with runes, the portable pensieve Hermione had mentioned. Just in time, Ron greeted him. Hermione was about to explain how this memory viewing thing works to the demigods. It's fascinating technology, Annabeth was saying, examining the pensieve with scholarly interest. Completely different from any Greek magical approach to memory. The theory is that memories exist as both magical and physical impressions, Hermione explained, holding up one of the vials of swirling silver-blue liquid. This contains actual memory strands extracted from Ministry witnesses who encountered Lestrange after the Battle of Hogwarts. And we can watch them. Like movies? Percy asked, looking skeptical. Better than movies, Harry said, joining the group. You experience the memory almost firsthand, though you can't interact with it. Hermione unstoppered the first vial, carefully pouring its contents into the pensieve. The silvery substance swirled, forming patterns that seemed almost sentient. "We all need to touch the surface simultaneously," she instructed. "The memory will pull us in." The 5 of them gathered around the basin, each extending a finger toward the swirling surface. "On 3, Harry directed. 1, 2, 3, they touched the memory in unison, and the world lurched sideways. Harry felt the familiar sensation of falling forward into the pensieve, the room around them dissolving as they plunged into someone else's recollections. They landed in what appeared to be a small, cluttered shop filled with ancient artifacts and dusty tomes. Greek letters adorned many of the items, and the air smelled of old parchment and incense. "Athens, November 2023, came a disembodied voice, the memory's owner narrating for ministry records. I observed the suspect entering Demetriou's Antiquities on Plaka Street. A tall, gaunt figure with hollow cheeks and burning eyes entered the shop, Rodolphus Lestrange, looking significantly more haggard than he had during the Battle of Hogwarts. His once aristocratic features were now sharp with fanaticism, his movements jerky yet purposeful as he approached the proprietor, an elderly Greek wizard with a stooped back. I require access to your special collection," Lestrange said without preamble, his voice raspy as if seldom used. "The Hecatean manuscripts." The old shopkeeper eyed him suspiciously. "Those are not for sale, Englishman. Especially not to those who cannot prove scholarly credentials." Lestrange's hand moved to his pocket, withdrawing not a wand but a small obsidian disc etched with a triple-faced woman surrounded by dogs. "Will this suffice as credential?" The shopkeeper's expression transformed from suspicion to fearful respect. "The mark of the crossroads. Where did you acquire such an artifact?" "That is not your concern," Lestrange replied coldly. "The manuscripts. Now." Reluctantly, the shopkeeper shuffled to a back room, returning moments later with a scroll case made of ancient, cracked leather. "The Delphic Codex," he murmured, handling it with reverence. "The only surviving text describing Hecate's original blessing of the first wizarding families." "And the ritual sites?" Lestrange pressed. "All documented within," the shopkeeper confirmed. The 5 nexus points where her power entered the mortal realm. Lestrange smiled thinly. "Excellent." In a movement too swift for the elderly proprietor to counter, he drew his wand. "Obliviate," he hissed, modifying the man's memory before taking the scroll case and exiting the shop. The scene dissolved, reforming into a mountainside overlooking a valley of ruins, Delphi, Harry recognized from the diagrams they had studied. February 2024, the narrator's voice continued. Surveillance established at Delphi following intelligence from Greek magical authorities about unusual activities. Lestrange appeared again, now accompanied by 3 robed figures whose faces remained concealed by shadows despite the bright Greek sun. They moved through the ruins with purpose, avoiding the Muggle tourists who wandered obliviously among the ancient stones. The memory's perspective followed them to a section of ruins off the main path, where Lestrange knelt before what appeared to be an ordinary rock face. He pressed the obsidian disc against the stone, and a doorway shimmered into existence, a passage leading downward into darkness. "The entrance to the subterranean chambers," Hermione whispered, though the memory's figures couldn't hear them. "Just like in Annabeth's diagrams." They followed the dark wizards down a narrow staircase carved directly into the living rock. The passage descended steeply, opening eventually into a vast underground chamber dominated by a circular platform surrounded by 3 altars arranged in triangular formation. "The inner sanctum," Lestrange announced to his companions, his voice echoing against the ancient stones. "For centuries, wizardkind has been blind to the true source of our power. We attribute our magic to bloodlines, to genetics, to natural law, but it is none of these things." He caressed the central altar with almost loving reverence. "Our magic is divine in origin, a gift from Hecate, yes, but a gift that can be renegotiated." One of the robed figures stepped forward. "The ritual requires sacrifice, Rodolphus. Are you prepared for what it will cost?" "I have already sacrificed everything," Lestrange replied, his eyes burning with zealous light. "My freedom. My wife. My lord. What remains is merely flesh, a small price for what we will achieve. And what exactly is that? Asked another figure skeptically. You speak of reclaiming magic source, but to what end? Lestrange smiled, the expression transforming his gaunt face into something truly frightening. The Dark Lord sought immortality through division of his soul. A brilliant but fundamentally flawed approach. He withdrew a dagger made of the same obsidian as the disc. I seek immortality through ascension, by claiming the divine fire at its source and becoming its new guardian. You intend to usurp a goddess? The third figure asked, voice trembling with either fear or excitement. Not usurp, Lestrange corrected. Succeed. Hecate's power wanes as she struggles to maintain the barriers between worlds. When they collapse completely, that power will seek a new vessel. He drew the dagger across his palm, letting blood drip onto the central altar. I will be that vessel. The chamber trembled as his blood touched the ancient stone, green fire erupting from the altars. The memory became chaotic then, the perspective shifting wildly as the unseen observer retreated from the escalating magical disturbance. The last clear image was of Lestrange standing in the center of the green flames, arms outstretched, face ecstatic as power flowed into him. The memory dissolved, and they found themselves ejected from the pensive, back in the big house recreation room. Bloody hell, Ron breathed, his face pale. He's not just trying to control monsters or attack wizards with Hecate's bloodlines. He's trying to replace her. That explains the rifts, Annabeth said, her analytical mind quickly processing the implications. He's deliberately weakening the barriers Hecate maintains between worlds, forcing her to divert more of her power to prevent complete collapse. While simultaneously attacking sites connected to her original blessing, Hermione added, harvesting the residual divine power from wizarding bloodlines to strengthen himself. And the next step would be to target the most powerful source of her blood in the mortal world, Percy said grimly, looking at Harry. Me, Harry confirmed, his hand unconsciously rising to touch the resurrection stone hanging from his neck. He's not just a dark wizard anymore. He's absorbed some measure of divine power, that's how he's controlling the enhanced monsters. But he's still mortal, Percy pointed out. Powerful, yes, but not a god. Not yet. The new moon, Harry realized suddenly. Hecate said we had to seal the breach before the new moon, when the veil between worlds is thinnest. That must be when Lestrange plans to complete his ascension. Annabeth checked a calendar on her phone. That's tomorrow night. We're cutting it close. Then we'd better get moving, Percy said, rising with determination. The Pegasi should be ready by now. If we leave within the hour, we can reach Camp Jupiter by midnight, transfer to the Roman passage, and be at Delphi by tomorrow afternoon. Time enough to prepare for the ritual, Harry nodded. And to stop Lestrange before he can complete his plan. As they gathered their equipment and supplies, Harry felt the familiar surge of pre-mission tension, the heightened awareness that came before facing danger. But mixed with it was a new confidence born from his training with Hecate and the deeper understanding of his own nature. Whatever awaited them at Delphi, he would face it not just as the wizard who defeated Voldemort, but as the son of Hecate, bridging two magical traditions that had been separated for too long. The journey to Camp Jupiter passed in a blur of wind and stars as they flew westward across America on the backs of Pegasi. Despite the urgency of their mission, Harry couldn't help but marvel at the experience, soaring above cities and mountains, watching the landscape change from the forested east coast to the vast central plains to the majestic Rocky Mountains. Even after years of Quidditch, flying on a living, thinking creature was utterly different from a broomstick. They landed at the Roman camp shortly before midnight, where they were met by a welcoming committee led by a tall, regal girl introduced as Reyna, praetor of the 12th Legion. The Roman demigods regarded the wizards with curious respect, especially after Percy explained their mission in hushed tones to the senior officers. The passage to the Mediterranean has been prepared, Reyna informed them after a brief council. Terminus has granted special dispensation for your unusual guests. She eyed the wizards' wands with particular interest. though he insists they surrender their weapons before entering New Rome proper. "We're just passing through," Percy assured her. "No time for the scenic tour, unfortunately." "A pity," Reyna replied, though her expression remained serious. "The breach you described has affected us as well. Our augurs report disturbing omens, the veil between worlds thinning beyond anything in our records." "All the more reason to reach Delphi quickly," Annabeth said. They were escorted to an ancient archway standing alone on a hillside overlooking the camp. Roman symbols adorned its weathered stone, glowing faintly with golden light in the darkness. "The Porticus Mediterraneus," Reyna explained. "Established during the height of the empire to allow rapid movement of demigod legionnaires between Rome and its provinces. It has been maintained continuously for over 2,000 years. Harry studied the archway with professional interest. "Similar to our port key network, but permanently anchored to specific locations." "Exactly," Annabeth confirmed. "The Romans excelled at magical infrastructure." A tall, thin figure materialized beside them, a statue that moved and spoke, its marble face severe. "Identifications, please," it demanded in a prim voice. "All travelers must be properly documented before passage." "Terminus," Percy greeted the statue god with forced patience. "We have authorization from Chiron and yourself for this party to travel to Delphi. Emergency basis." Terminus huffed, circling them with remarkable mobility for a being with no legs. "Procedures exist for a reason, Perseus Jackson. Even emergencies must be properly filed." He peered closely at the wizards. "And these three? Non-standard magical signatures, unauthorized implements. One of them is a son of Hecate," Reyna interjected smoothly. "Surely that grants certain courtesies." The statue god paused, studying Harry more carefully. Yes, I see it now. Unusual variant, but definitely divine parentage." He sniffed disapprovingly. "Very well. You may proceed, but I'm noting this irregularity in my report." With a wave of his stone hand, the archway flared to life, its empty space filling with swirling golden light. "Step through in single file," Reyna instructed. "Focus clearly on your destination, Delphi, the Temple of Apollo. The passage will do the rest." Percy went first, followed by Annabeth, then Hermione, Ron, and finally Harry. As he approached the glowing portal, Harry felt the resurrection stone pulse against his chest, resonating with the ancient magic of the Roman gateway. "Good fortune, son of Hecate," Reyna said quietly as he passed. "May your mother's light guide your path." Harry nodded in acknowledgement before stepping into the golden light. Unlike the compressed, suffocating sensation of apparition, the Roman passage felt like walking through a sun-warmed corridor of light. Time and space bent around him, stretching and compressing simultaneously. For a brief, disorienting moment, he glimpsed other pathways branching from the main corridor, routes to Rome, to Alexandria, to Constantinople, before the passage delivered him with a gentle push onto sun-baked stone. He emerged on a mountainside overlooking a breathtaking valley. Ancient ruins stretched below them, gleaming white in the Mediterranean sun. The others were already there, Percy and Annabeth oriented and alert, Ron and Hermione still blinking in disorientation at the sudden transition. "Delphi," Annabeth said, gesturing to the archaeological site below. Once the center of the Greek world, home to Apollo's oracle, and she glanced at Harry, Hecate's underworld passages. Harry felt it immediately, a resonance in his blood, a recognition of sacred space connected to his divine mother. But beneath that sensation was something discordant, a wrongness that set his teeth on edge. "Something's not right," he murmured, drawing his wand instinctively. "The magic here is damaged." Percy nodded grimly, already uncapping Riptide. "I feel it too. Like the air before a major storm." They descended toward the ruins cautiously, avoiding the main tourist paths. Hermione cast disillusionment charms on their group, rendering them nearly invisible to casual observation. As they approached the area they had seen in the pensive memory, the magical disturbance intensified. There, Annabeth pointed to a seemingly solid rock face identical to the one Lestrange had activated with his obsidian disc. The entrance to the underground chambers. Harry stepped forward, drawing the resurrection stone from around his neck. Following an instinct he couldn't fully explain, he pressed it against the rock surface. Green light spread from the point of contact, outlining a doorway that materialized as the stone recognized Hecate's power within both the artifact and Harry himself. "Well, that's handy," Ron observed. "He knows we're coming," Harry cautioned as the doorway solidified. "Lestrange will have defenses in place. Then we'll handle them," Percy said confidently, his bronze sword gleaming in the sunlight. "We've dealt with worse." They entered the passage in tight formation, Percy and Harry in front, Ron and Hermione flanking, and Annabeth bringing up the rear with her celestial bronze dagger drawn. The narrow staircase descended steeply into darkness, lit only by the combined illumination of Harry's wand and the faint glow emanating from the resurrection stone. As they descended, the air grew thick with magical energy, both the ancient power of Delphi itself and the corrupt, discordant force of Lestrange's ritual. Harry could feel the two magics clashing, creating the instability that threatened to tear open the barriers between worlds. They emerged into the vast chamber they had seen in the memory, but it was dramatically transformed. The three altars now burned with continuous green fire, but the flames were shot through with that unnatural purple energy they had observed in the enhanced monsters. In the center of the triangular formation, a swirling vortex of power had formed, a rift in reality itself, through which glimpses of other realms flickered like images in a fractured mirror. Standing before this rift, arms outstretched as he channeled its power, was Rodolphius Lestrange. He was both more and less than the man they had seen in the memory, his physical form partially translucent, green and purple energy coursing through him like visible veins. His eyes, when he turned to face them, burned with the same emerald fire as Hecate's, but corrupted, tainted with madness and raw ambition. "Harry Potter," he greeted, his voice echoing strangely as if coming simultaneously from his mouth and from the rift behind him. "The boy who lived. Or should I say, the son of Hecate." He smiled, the expression horrifying on his transformed face. "How fitting that you should witness my ascension." "The only thing you're ascending to is Azkaban, Lestrange," Harry replied, his wand aimed steadily at the transformed Death Eater. "Or whatever remains of you after we close that rift." Lestrange laughed, the sound rippling with unnatural harmonics. "Close it? You misunderstand, Potter. The rift isn't a problem to be solved, it's the solution. For millennia, wizards have lived in ignorance of their true potential, slaves to diluted power passed down through increasingly weakened bloodlines." He gestured to the swirling vortex. "I have found the source. Direct access to divine magic without the limitations of mortal flesh or the arbitrary rules of wands and incantations." "You're destroying the barriers between worlds," Annabeth called out, her analytical mind quickly assessing the situation. "If that rift widens further, it won't just be divine power coming through, it will be primordials, entities that even the gods fear." "A calculated risk," Lestrange dismissed. "When I ascend to replace Hecate as guardian of the crossroads, I will determine which entities may pass and which may not." "You're insane," Ron stated flatly. "No wizard can become a god." "Perhaps not an ordinary wizard," Lestrange conceded, his burning gaze returning to Harry. "But one already carrying divine blood. One whose mother is the goddess herself." His smile widened. "I had hoped to harvest your power directly, Potter, but finding you proved challenging. No matter. There are other sources, other bloodlines." With a casual gesture, he revealed what had been hidden behind the central altar, three unconscious figures, bound by glowing purple restraints. Harry recognized Bill Weasley's distinctive red hair, alongside two other wizards he didn't know. "Bill!" Ron cried, starting forward only to be restrained by Hermione. "Ancient bloodlines," Lestrange explained. "Weasley, Ollivander, Shafiq, all descendants of Hecate's original blessed families. Their sacrifice will provide the final surge of power needed for my transformation. He checked an ornate timepiece. At precisely midnight, the moment of the new moon, the veil will reach its thinnest point. Perfect timing for a change in management, wouldn't you say? We won't let that happen, Percy stated, riptide glowing with celestial bronze light as he edged to one side, clearly looking for an opening to attack. You have no choice in the matter, Demigod, Lestrange replied dismissively. But I am nothing if not sporting. By all means, attempt to stop me. He gestured again, and 4 rifts opened around the chamber's perimeter. From each emerged a monstrous figure, hybrid creatures combining Greek monsters with wizard-enhanced modifications. A minotaur wielding wizard-crafted blades of purple fire. A chimera whose multiple heads cast different magical attacks. A giant serpent that resembled a basilisk but moved with the speed and precision of a striking manticore. And most terrifying, a dementor-like wraith with the multiple arms and deadly accuracy of a 100-handed one. Keep them occupied, my pets, Lestrange commanded before turning back to the central rift, resuming the complex incantation that was widening the breach between worlds. Split up. Percy shouted as the monsters charged. Harry, get to the altars. We'll handle these things. Harry nodded, already moving toward the nearest altar as the chamber erupted into chaos. Percy engaged the Minotaur, his sword techniques keeping the beast at bay while Annabeth darted around the chimera, analyzing its patterns for weaknesses. Ron and Hermione worked in seamless tandem against the serpent, their complementary spellwork creating barriers and counterattacks with practiced precision. That left the Dementor hybrid pursuing Harry as he fought his way toward the first altar. Cold dread washed over him, the familiar, soul-draining presence of a Dementor combined with the relentless physical threat of 100 striking limbs. Expecto Patronum. Harry called, focusing on his happiest memories. But instead of his usual stag, what erupted from his wand was something new, a Patronus that combined his stag's form with spectral hounds like those that accompanied Hecate. The hybrid Patronus charged the wraith creature, driving it back momentarily with combined wizard and divine power. Using the reprieve, Harry reached the first altar. Up close, he could see the complex runic patterns carved into its surface, ancient Greek symbols interwoven with what he recognized as proto-wizard script, the earliest form of the magical language that would eventually develop into modern spellcraft. Following Hecate's instructions from their training, Harry placed the resurrection stone at the altar's center, channeling both his wizard magic through his wand and his divine power through direct intention. Green fire, pure and untainted, flared from the stone, temporarily overwhelming Lestrange's corrupted purple flames. The first anchor is set, he called to the others. I need to reach the second altar. Across the chamber, Percy had driven the Minotaur back against a wall, riptide slashing in golden arcs that the monster could barely counter. Working on it, he shouted back, ducking a fiery blade before delivering a counterstrike that opened a gash in the creature's side. Annabeth had determined the chimera's weakness, its heads operated independently, making them vulnerable when forced to coordinate complex movements. She called to Ron, who redirected his attention from the serpent long enough to send a precisely aimed reductor curse at the chamber ceiling above the chimera. Stone fragments rained down, forcing the monster to divide its attention in ways its hybrid nature couldn't manage efficiently. Harry reclaimed the resurrection stone and fought his way toward the second altar, his hybrid Patronus clearing a path through the wraith's grasping limbs. As he moved, he felt the chamber's energy shifting, Lestrange's ritual approaching a critical juncture as the new moon neared its zenith. The central rift pulsed ominously, widening to reveal glimpses of what lay beyond, a realm of primordial darkness where ancient shapes moved with malevolent purpose. Lestrange stood at the threshold, his body increasingly translucent as divine energy flowed through him, transforming him into something neither human nor god but a dangerous hybrid of both. Potter, he called, his voice now barely recognizable. You cannot stop what is already in motion. The old order ends tonight. Maybe, Harry replied, reaching the second altar. But not the way you imagine. He placed the resurrection stone on the altar, repeating the process of channeling dual magical currents. The second anchor flared to life, green fire shooting upward to form an arc of energy that connected with the first altar. The chamber trembled as the two magical sources contested, Lestrange's corrupted power against the pure divine energy Harry was channeling from Hecate's blessing. The monsters reacted to the shift in magical balance, their movements becoming more erratic, more desperate. Percy took advantage of the Minotaur's disorientation to deliver a fatal strike, driving Riptide through its chest. The creature dissolved into golden dust shot through with purple energy that dissipated more slowly than normal monster essence. "One down," Percy called, already moving to assist Annabeth with the chimera. Hermione had managed to bind the serpent with enchanted ropes while Ron bombarded it with freezing charms that slowed its movements considerably. "Harry," she shouted. "Whatever you're doing is affecting the monsters. They're weakening." Harry nodded in acknowledgement, already fighting his way toward the third and final altar. The wraith creature pursued him relentlessly, its 100 arms grasping at him from all directions while its dementor-like presence drained hope and warmth from the air around him. Drawing on both his wizard training and his newly awakened divine heritage, Harry created a shield unlike anything he'd managed before, a barrier of interwoven magical currents that repelled both physical and spiritual attacks. The wraith recoiled as its limbs encountered the shield, giving Harry the opening he needed to reach the third altar. As he placed the resurrection stone on the final anchor point, Lestrange seemed to realize the true threat to his plans. With a howl of rage, he redirected a portion of the rift's power toward Harry, sending a blast of corrupted energy that shattered his shield and sent him sprawling across the chamber floor. "You think you can outmatch me in Hecate's domain, boy?" Lestrange snarled, his form now more energy than flesh. "I have spent years studying her mysteries, sacrificing everything to claim her power. What are you but an accidental child who learned of his heritage mere days ago?" Harry struggled to his feet, the resurrection stone clutched tightly in his hand. "That's the difference between us, Lestrange," he replied, his voice steady despite the pain radiating through his body. "I don't want to claim her power. I want to honor it." With those words, Harry felt something shift within him, a final integration of his dual nature. Not wizard or demigod, but both simultaneously, each aspect enhancing rather than competing with the other. The resurrection stone blazed with emerald light in response to this internal harmony, its power amplified by Harry's newfound balance. In that moment of perfect clarity, Harry understood what Hecate had been trying to teach him. The sealing ritual wasn't just about the technical execution of magical forces, it was about embodying the bridge between worlds that Hecate herself represented, becoming a living crossroads where different magics could coexist and complement each other. With renewed purpose, he moved back toward the third altar, even as Lestrange gathered another attack. Before the corrupted Death Eater could strike, however, something unexpected happened. The chamber doors burst open, admitting a flood of silver moonlight and a tall, elegant figure that radiated divine power. "Enough," Hecate declared, her presence immediately dominating the space despite her earlier claim that she could not approach the breach. "Mother," Harry whispered, surprise and relief mingling in his voice. "You!" Lestrange gasped, his expression contorting with rage and fear. "You cannot interfere. The ancient laws, applied differently at crossroads," Hecate finished for him, her green eyes, so like Harry's, flashing with controlled anger. "Especially when a mortal attempts to usurp my domain through the corruption of my own blessing." She turned to Harry. "The ritual, my son. Complete it now, while I hold him at bay." Lestrange screamed in defiance, directing the full force of the rift's power toward the goddess. Hecate met his attack with her own divine energy, the two forces colliding in a spectacular display of magical combat that filled the chamber with blinding light and deafening sound. Protected by his mother's intervention, Harry returned to the third altar and placed the resurrection stone at its center. The moment the stone touched the ancient surface, all three altars flared with synchronized green fire, forming a perfect triangle of power that surrounded the central rift. Drawing on everything he had learned, from his years at Hogwarts to his recent training with Hecate, Harry began the sealing incantation. Ancient Greek syllables flowed from his lips while his wand traced the complex patterns Hecate had taught him. Simultaneously, he directed his divine heritage through pure intention, creating the dual magical current necessary to repair the damaged barriers between worlds. The chamber resonated with the ritual's power, the very stones humming in harmony with Harry's words. The triangular formation of green fire contracted gradually, forcing the rift to narrow as the natural order reasserted itself against Lestrange's corruption. No! Lestrange howled, abandoning his attack on Hecate to throw himself toward Harry. I will not be denied. But before he could reach Harry, Percy intercepted him, riptide slashing through the Death Eater's semi-corporeal form. Back off, the son of Poseidon growled. This ends now. Lestrange recoiled, his body destabilizing where the celestial bronze had cut through his transformed essence. He turned desperately toward the rift, perhaps hoping to escape through it, but found his path blocked by Annabeth, Ron, and Hermione, all positioned strategically to prevent his retreat. It's over, Lestrange, Harry called, never breaking the ritual's rhythm. The breach is closing. Indeed, the rift had shrunk to half its original size, the glimpses of primordial realms beyond growing fainter as the barriers strengthened. The remaining monsters in the chamber began to dissolve as their connection to Lestrange's power weakened, returning to their natural state before dissipating entirely. Trapped between advancing heroes and a closing escape route, Lestrange made a final, desperate decision. With an inhuman scream, he hurled himself directly into the narrowing rift, perhaps hoping to claim divine power from the other side. For a brief, terrible moment, his form hung suspended between worlds, 1 foot in reality, the rest stretched into dimensions humans were never meant to perceive. Then, as Harry completed the final words of the sealing ritual, the rift snapped shut with devastating finality. Lestrange's scream cut off abruptly, his physical form shredding into particles of light that scattered across the chamber before fading into nothingness. Whether he had been destroyed completely or merely trapped in some other realm was impossible to know. The green fire from the 3 altars converged on the spot where the rift had been, forming a protective seal that pulsed once with blinding intensity before settling into a subtle, permanent barrier. The magical turbulence that had filled the chamber gradually subsided, leaving behind the natural sacred energy of Delphi, purified and balanced once more. Harry lowered his wand, exhaustion crashing over him as the ritual's demands caught up with his mortal body. Percy was at his side instantly, supporting him before he could collapse. Easy, the son of Poseidon said. You did it, man. The rift is sealed. Well done, my son. Hecate's voice was gentler than Harry had heard it before. She approached, her divine presence somehow more approachable now that the crisis had passed. You have honored both your heritages today. Thanks, Harry managed, still leaning on Percy for support. But I couldn't have done it without help. He looked around at his friends, both old and new, who had fought alongside him. Any of it. Ron and Hermione had already freed Bill and the other captives, who were beginning to regain consciousness, confused but largely unharmed. Annabeth was examining the sealed center of the chamber with scholarly interest, her analytical mind no doubt cataloging every detail for future reference. What happens now? Harry asked, turning back to Hecate. With the barriers between our worlds? The goddess considered him thoughtfully. They remain distinct, as they should. The wizarding world and the world of Greek divinity have different purposes, different destinies. But perhaps they need not be entirely separate. She gestured to the chamber around them. This place can serve as a regulated crossing point, a controlled interface where knowledge and assistance might pass between domains when needed. An embassy, Percy suggested, catching the concept immediately. Of sorts, Hecate agreed. Maintained by those who understand both worlds. Her gaze rested meaningfully on Harry. Me, Harry realized. You want me to be the, what, ambassador? When your other duties permit, Hecate replied with the ghost of a smile. I understand you have a promising career in wizard law enforcement. Harry stared at her in surprise. You've been watching my life. From a distance, as the ancient laws require, she confirmed. But with interest, and She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully, with pride. The simple statement affected Harry more deeply than he would have expected. All his life, he had wondered what his parents would think of him, if they would be proud of the man he had become. To hear that confirmation from Hecate, however distant she had been, touched something profound within him. "I'll consider it," he said finally. "The ambassador role. But my home is still the wizarding world." "As it should be," Hecate nodded. "You bridge worlds, Harry Potter, but everyone needs a place to truly belong." She glanced at the recovering captives. "Your friends should return to that world now. They have experienced enough of divine matters for one lifetime." "What about the monsters?" Annabeth asked, rejoining the group. "The enhanced hybrids Lestrange created, are there more out there?" "Without his corrupted power to sustain them, they will revert to their natural state," Hecate assured her. "Still dangerous, of course, but manageable through traditional means." She turned to address them all collectively. "What you have accomplished here prevented catastrophe beyond mortal comprehension. The Olympian Council owes you a debt, though do not expect most of them to acknowledge it directly." This last was said with dry humor that reminded Harry forcefully of Professor McGonagall. "Will we see you again?" he asked, surprising himself with the question. Hecate regarded him with those identical green eyes. "Perhaps. The boundaries between gods and their children remain, but—" She hesitated, then continued with unusual warmth, "Connections, once established, have their own power." With those words, she began to shimmer with divine light, preparing to depart. "The Roman passage will return you to your respective homes when you are ready. Farewell, heroes of two worlds." In a flash of emerald brilliance, she vanished, leaving them in the now peaceful chamber beneath Delphi. "Well," Ron broke the silence, supporting his still groggy brother. "That was something. Definitely goes in the top 5 weirdest missions," Percy agreed with a tired grin. Harry looked down at the resurrection stone in his hand, still glowing faintly with Hecate's power. It felt different now, less like a dangerous artifact and more like a balanced tool, its purpose refined through the ritual. "We should get everyone home," he said, tucking the stone safely away. "The Ministry will have questions, and I imagine Camp Half-Blood will too." "There'll be time for explanations later," Hermione said practically. "For now, I think we all need rest and healing." As they gathered the rescued wizards and prepared to depart, Harry found himself walking alongside Percy through the ancient passage that would lead them back to the surface. "So," the son of Poseidon said casually, "how does it feel? Being the official Demigod wizard ambassador?" Harry chuckled, the sound echoing off the stone walls. "Honestly? Like one more complicated title to add to my collection. The boy who lived, the chosen one, now the ambassador to Camp Half-Blood. At least this one comes with cool powers and not just unwanted fame," Percy pointed out. "True," Harry conceded. "Though I'm still figuring out how to explain all this to the Auror office. Sorry I missed work, was busy sealing interdimensional rifts with my divine mother, isn't exactly a standard excuse." Percy laughed. "If it helps, I've found that saving the world usually earns some leeway with authority figures." "Usually." They emerged from the underground chambers into the bright Greek afternoon. The archaeological site of Delphi spread before them in peaceful splendor, tourists wandering obliviously among ruins that had just served as the backdrop for reality-altering magical combat. "Will you visit?" Percy asked as they waited for the others to join them. "Camp Half-Blood, I mean. You'd be welcome, and I know Annabeth is dying to interrogate you about wizard magical theory." "I'd like that," Harry replied, genuinely meaning it. "And you should visit London sometime. I owe you a proper tour of Diagon Alley without monster attacks." "Deal," Percy grinned, extending his hand. "Though knowing our luck, something will probably try to kill us anyway." Harry shook the offered hand, feeling the bond that had formed between them, demigods from different pantheons, heroes of different worlds, yet connected by shared experiences that few others could understand. As the rest of their group emerged into the sunlight, Harry found himself reflecting on how much had changed in just a few days. He had discovered an entirely new dimension to his identity, met his divine mother, learned to wield magic in ways he'd never imagined possible, and helped prevent a catastrophe that would have affected multiple realities. Yet somehow, the most significant change was internal, a new sense of completion, of understanding his place in the world. Or worlds, rather. He was still Harry Potter, still the wizard who had defeated Voldemort, still the Auror committed to protecting magical Britain. But he was also the son of Hecate, a bridge between ancient traditions, a guardian of the crossroads in his own right. Not a replacement for the goddess, as Lestrange had insanely attempted to become, but an extension of her domain in the mortal world. A son honoring his mother's legacy while forging his own path. Ready to head back? Hermione asked, joining him with Ron and the others. Harry nodded, taking a last look at Delphi, at the sacred site that had almost become the flashpoint for interdimensional disaster and was now a symbol of renewed connection between long-separated magical traditions. Ready, he confirmed, feeling the truth of it settle into his bones. Whatever came next, whether as wizard, demigod, or ambassador between worlds, Harry Potter would face it as he always had, with courage, with friends at his side, and with the certainty that while destiny might suggest paths, the choices that mattered remained his own. 3 months later Percy Jackson stepped through the magical barrier that separated Platform 9 3/4 from the mundane world of King's Cross Station, grinning at the startled expressions of nearby wizards who weren't accustomed to seeing American demigods emerge from the supposedly secure entrance. "You know, there are easier ways to make an entrance," came an amused voice from his right. Percy turned to find Harry waiting for him, dressed in the formal robes of an Auror but with a casual ease that hadn't been present during their first meeting. The son of Hecate looked more comfortable in his skin now, the integration of his dual heritage evident in the faint green shimmer that occasionally flickered in his eyes when he used magic. "Where's the fun in that?" Percy replied, clasping Harry's offered hand. "Besides, Annabeth insisted I experience authentic wizarding transportation, at least once. She's still mad she couldn't come along. Architecture conference in Athens, right?" Harry asked as they moved through the crowded platform. Hermione was disappointed too. She had about 600 questions prepared about Camp Half-Blood's magical boundaries. Percy laughed, following Harry toward the exit. Those two would either solve all the world's problems or accidentally destroy reality if they spent too much time collaborating. Probably both, Harry agreed with a chuckle. They emerged onto the main concourse of King's Cross, where Harry led them to a secluded corner before offering his arm. "Ready for your first apparition?" Percy eyed the offered arm dubiously, remembering Harry's description of the sensation. "As ready as I'll ever be for magical teleportation that feels like being squeezed through a rubber tube." "It grows on you," Harry assured him unconvincingly. "Hold tight." The world compressed around them, and Percy experienced the distinctly unpleasant sensation of apparition firsthand. They reappeared on a quiet London street before a row of townhouses, Percy staggering slightly as his demigod instinct struggled to reconcile the magical displacement. "That," he declared when he could speak again, "is officially worse than shadow travel." "And that's saying something." Harry grinned unsympathetically. "Welcome to Grimmauld Place, temporary headquarters for our new interdimensional cooperation initiative." He gestured toward the buildings, and Percy watched in fascination as number 12 seemed to squeeze itself into existence between 11 and 13. "Nice trick," Percy commented as they approached. "Reminds me of Camp Half-Blood's boundaries." "Similar principle," Harry confirmed, opening the door to reveal an interior dramatically transformed from the gloomy house Percy remembered. The dark wallpaper had been replaced with warm colors, the mounted house elf heads removed, and the entire space filled with natural light from magically enhanced windows. "We've been renovating." Percy followed him into what had once been the formal dining room, now converted into a meeting space dominated by a large round table. Maps of both the mortal world and various divine realms covered the walls, alongside charts tracking magical convergence points and potential crossroads between pantheons. Ron and Hermione were already there, deep in discussion with Annabeth via what appeared to be an iris message modified to work through a wizarding mirror. Neutralize the inherent instability at the Athens nexus, Annabeth was saying, her voice coming clearly through the magical connection. If we could adapt the runic configurations Harry used at Delphi, oh, Percy's here. She brightened at the sight of him. How was the train? Very, train-like, Percy replied with a grin. How's the conference? Fascinating. I've been comparing notes with magical architects from 3 different traditions. Did you know wizards developed load-bearing charms independently from but parallel to Greek column mathematics? The convergent evolution of magical construction techniques across cultures suggests, maybe save the architectural theory for when you're both in the same room? Harry suggested diplomatically, noting Percy's glazed expression. Hermione nodded in agreement. We should focus on today's agenda anyway. The Ministry's International Magical Cooperation Department has finally approved our proposal for a formal exchange program between Hogwarts and Camp Half-Blood. Took them long enough, Ron commented. Only 3 months of committees, subcommittees, and what felt like every bureaucrat in Britain adding their 2 nuts. Chiron's thrilled, Percy reported. Though Mr. D pretended he couldn't remember what we were talking about, then called me Peter Johnson and threatened to turn me into a dolphin for interrupting his pinnacle game. Sounds like him, Harry said with a smile, having met the camp director during his own visit to Long Island the previous month. What about the Olympian Council? Any official response yet? Percy shrugged. About what you'd expect. Zeus pretended it was his idea all along. Poseidon and Athena are cautiously supportive. Apollo's writing terrible haikus about wizards with sticks that he insists on reciting at every opportunity. And Hecate? Harry asked, trying for casual but not quite achieving it. Percy's expression softened. She's on board. Actually, she's been the most actively involved, helping establish the magical protocols for safe crossings between our worlds. Harry nodded, his face revealing little, but Percy had come to recognize the subtle signs of emotion the British wizard tended to conceal. Since their adventure at Delphi, Harry had met with Hecate twice more, brief encounters at crossroads moments, gradually building something that, while not exactly a conventional mother-son relationship, represented more connection than either had expected. Right then, Ron said, breaking the momentary silence. Let's get on with the official business so we can get to the good part, trying to teach Percy wizard chess. I still don't see why the pieces have to talk back, Percy complained good-naturedly. Chess is complicated enough without your knight giving you attitude about your strategy. The meeting proceeded efficiently, with updates on the various initiatives they had established following the Delphi incident. A monitoring system for detecting unusual convergences between magical realms. Training protocols for both demigods and select aurors in recognizing and handling cross-pantheon threats. Curriculum development for educational exchanges between their respective training facilities. Throughout the discussion, Percy found himself marveling at how quickly their improvised alliance had evolved into something formal and structured, something with potential to change both their worlds for the better. What had begun with a simple extraction mission had become a bridge between magical traditions that had been separate for millennia. As the meeting concluded and they transitioned to more social activities, including Ron's promised wizard chess lesson, Percy caught Harry alone for a moment near the enchanted window overlooking London. "How are you really doing with all this?" he asked quietly. "The ambassador role, the dual identity, all of it." Harry considered the question seriously, his gaze traveling over the city he had protected for so many years. "It's still an adjustment," he admitted. "There are moments when it feels like too much, one more extraordinary thing in a life that never quite manages to be ordinary." He smiled slightly. "But then I remember what you told me that first day at Camp Half-Blood." "What was that?" "Something profound and wise, I'm sure." Harry's smile widened. "You said being a demigod explains who you are, but doesn't define who you become. That part's still up to you." Percy nodded, remembering the conversation. "Still true. That's what I've come to realize," Harry continued, absently touching the resurrection stone that now hung permanently around his neck, transformed into a conduit for his dual magical nature rather than a dangerous hallow. Being Hecate's son, being a wizard, being the boy who lived, they're all parts of me. But they're not all of me. The eternal demigod philosophical question, Percy agreed. Are we defined by our parents, our powers, our prophecies, or by our choices? I think I finally know the answer, Harry said, turning to face his friend. It's yes. All of it matters, none of it controls us completely. From across the room, Ron called for Percy to stop avoiding his imminent chess humiliation, prompting both heroes to rejoin the group with matching grins. As Percy settled in for his introduction to the uniquely hazardous wizard version of chess, he reflected on the unexpected friendship that had formed between himself and Harry Potter. Different backgrounds, different magical traditions, different divine parentage, yet connected by the shared experience of being chosen by fate while insisting on making their own choices. Sons of gods, bearers of prophecies, saviors of worlds, and now, bridges between realms that had been separate for too long. Together, they had prevented catastrophe. More importantly, they had opened a door to something new, a future where different magical traditions might learn from each other, support each other, and perhaps create something greater than either could achieve alone. It wouldn't be easy. Gods were notoriously territorial, wizards were infamously resistant to change, and monsters would undoubtedly continue trying to kill them at every opportunity. But as Percy watched Harry laughing with his friends, both old and new, he felt certain that whatever challenges came next, they would face them together. After all, that was what heroes did best. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.